I was gonna flag you down as you drove by or something. I'm like, wait, it might not start.
Good morning. I hope you all are warm. Thank God we have heat in the building. My name is Bob Harb. I'm your town moderator. I'd like to call this 2023 Deliberative Session to order. Going through my agenda that many of you have picked up in the rear of the room, please make sure you have your voting cards. I'm going to ask for voice votes first. If it's close, then I'll ask you to raise your cards. On my far left are a bunch of blue chairs. Those are for the non-voters. If you could move to the far left, my left. If you're voting, you need to get your card from the supervisors of the checklist. Hopefully, all of you have them. I'd like to ask everyone now to please rise and join with me in a pledge of allegiance, a pledge to our old glory. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for our national anthem. Dean. Number of handouts. You'll have the agenda, my operating rules, which shortly I will go through. You have the town warrant and budget. You have the voter's guide. There's the MS 737 with all the fiscal numbers on it. MSDBT, the default budget. And I know there's some handouts from the Timberlane Regional School in the back of the room. So please, you're welcome to grab any of those and any other paraphernalia and handouts that might be on the table. It's an open table. I'm told the Plaistow Public Library on the evening of March 7th will have candidates night. That, I believe, Dean Zanella will also be taping, so you can watch it on cable, but live in person the evening of March 7th, 2023. Next, I'd like those in front of you on the dais to introduce themselves, starting with my far left.
Ted Carvis, Budget Committee.
Richard Anthony, Budget Committee.
David Gurns, Budget Committee.
Roy Walling, Budget Committee.
Katie Newton, Chair of the Committee.
And I'm Bob Harb, your town moderator.
Martha Fowler, Town Clerk.
Jay DeRoche, Board of Selectmen.
Bill Coy, Board of Selectmen.
Darrell Britton, Board of Selectmen. Jonathan Gifford, Board of Selectmen.
Greg Colby, Town Manager and Finance Director.
Beth Hossack, Admin Assistant.
Norman Major, Assistant Moderator.
Thank you all. I'm now going to read my moderator rules. They have not changed since last year, except in the last couple of years we've deleted all references to masks and COVID. Rule number 1, each participant will treat every other participant with due respect and courtesy. No smoking. Please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. Any voter who wishes to address the meeting will approach the mic. The mic is on my right in the front. You'll be recognized by me, the moderator. State your name and address. Our clerk needs to keep a record of that. So state your name and address. Spell your last name, unless maybe it's Smith, because I think she could smell that. So do not touch the microphone. Just when you need to adjust the height, you can do that, but leave the microphone as it is. Don't take it out of the stand, because then you have a hard time putting it back in. All questions to either the Budget Committee, the Board of Selectmen, any town officials should be directed to me through the moderator. Please stay at the microphone if you ask a question you want an answer. Each voter who desires to speak on an article will be given a chance to do so before any other voter is given a second opportunity to speak on the same issue. Each motion and amendment will be stated by myself before being voted on. Makers of a motion and seconds, please state your names for the clerk. It has to go in the public record. Only one amendment to a motion will be allowed on the floor at any time. No amendment to an amendment will be allowed. Proposals will be dealt with as subsequent amendments after the first amendment is voted on. Amendments must be in writing and signed by the voter. Paper and pens are on the table in front of me. Please use the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper to write your motion, even if it's a small motion. Those motions signed must be kept in the public record. Our clerk asks for your help because she gets these little slips of paper and it's very hard to keep it in the public record. So please use the 8.5 by 11 in front of me. There's pens there. I am told there's some motions that will be made on some of these articles. Nothing says you can't take a piece of paper, make the motion out, sign it, and have it ready when you come up to make the motion. I don't need them ahead of time, but it might help us in expediting the discussions and deliberation if you already had them done. Motions must be in the affirmative, no negative motions. Secret ballot must be requested by 5 voters in writing, and they need to be here at the meeting, and made before the vote. Challenges to any voice vote require 7 or more voters immediately after announced who may request a written ballot. Municipal Budget Act. Our manager, Greg Colby, will keep track of this. 10% limit, that will be explained by Katie Knutson, our Budget Committee Chair, when she makes her presentation. We're going to allow reasonable discussions on both sides of a motion before I'll accept a call of the question. A call of the question requires a 2/3 vote. Any amendment to fiscal amounts must be stated in dollars, not percentages. Convert your percent to a dollar amount if you're making an amendment on the budget. Upon an appeal of any ruling by the moderator, a majority vote will prevail. Robert's Rules of Order are only used as a guide. At any time during the meeting, these rules can be altered and amended by a majority vote of you present. All votes must be taken initially by a show of your voting cards or by voice vote. As I said, I'm going to call for a voice vote first. There's not a lot of us. If it's close and I can't tell, then I'll ask you to raise your cards. If there's not a big majority in the cards, then Mr. Major and some of the other folks will help us count. I'm not sure we'll get to that, but that'll be the 3rd level. So unless I hear any objections, these are our standard rules. We'll adopt these rules for the conduct of the meeting, subject to any amendment you guys may have later on. Hearing none, those rules are adopted. Now I'd like to recognize our Select Board Chair, Jay DeRoche. I believe you have a motion for certain non-voters to speak. Mr. DeRoche.
Yeah, I motion to allow the following non-residents to speak this deliberative session. Town Manager and Finance Director Greg Colby, Highway Supervisor Dan Garlington, Library Director Cav Vinton, Code Enforcement Officer Rick Foy, Facilities Supervisor Jim DeBonis, and Police Chief Richard Keene.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Bill Coyle. Corey, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstained. Ayes have it, it passes. I'd like to do a little shout out now for one of our residents, Samuel or Sam Kincaid. This morning, he's at another facility getting his Eagle Scout Award. So I'd like to give him a round of applause. A great honor. Mr. Major and myself apologize to him that we couldn't be with him in person because we're here. But we send him our best wishes and congratulations. We did get a certificate from the State House to be presented by Norm's wife, Brenda Major. So if he watches this on cable or his parents do, great job. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to do one other thing that's out of sequence. I'd like us all to rise for a moment of silence for our deceased selectman, John Blinn, Sr. A great, great citizen and a great select person and a great man. So a moment of silence for Mr. Blinn, please. Thank you. You may be seated. Now we move on to the warrant. (2023) Plaistow Town Warrant, State of New Hampshire. To the inhabitants of the town of Plaistow, New Hampshire, and the county of Rockingham in said state qualified to vote in town affairs, you are hereby notified to meet for the first session of the annual meeting at Plaistow Town Hall, second floor, 145 Main Street, in said Plaistow on Saturday, February 4th, 2023 at 9 a.m. in the forenoon to explain, discuss, and amend each article and to determine the form for the question on the ballot, except those articles where wording is prescribed by law. Snow date will be February 11th, 2023, or determined by the town moderator if necessary. The final voting on all warrant articles will take place by official ballot at the second session. Therefore, you are hereby notified to meet for the second session of the annual town meeting at the Plaistow Fish and Game Club. I'm going to say that again. The Plaistow Fish and Game Club, not the garage this time. 18 May Ray Avenue in said Plaistow on Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 at 7 a.m. in the forenoon until 7 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm going to repeat that again because it's a change. 7 a.m. in the forenoon until 7 p.m. in the afternoon to elect officials and to act on the following articles by official ballot voting. The articles beginning with P is to differentiate the town articles from the school district articles and from the town zoning articles that begin with Z. Citizens petition articles begin with C. Article P-2301 to elect all necessary town officials for ensuing year. This is an article that's mandated in the language by law, so it's unamendable. You can look at Article 2301 and see all the offices that you will be voting upon at the second session, the official ballot session on March 14th, 2023. The operating budget, general fund, Article P-2302. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant article and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $11,317,457. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget will be $11,062,817 with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town or bylaw, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman X and X1, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Majority vote required. Do I have a motion to place this article on the ballot as written? Made by Jay, I think.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Coy. For discussion, I turn it over to Katie Knudsen, our budget chair. She will make the presentation on this. Katie.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Before I get into the article, I just wanted to go over the 10% rule, which states that the total amount appropriated by the meeting, which is the deliberative session, including amounts appropriated in separate and special warrant articles, cannot exceed the total recommended by the budget committee by more than 10%. This is in concordance with RSA 32:18. The 10% calculation is computed on the total amount recommended by the Budget Committee, less that part of any appropriation item which constitutes fixed charges. Fixed charges include appropriations for principal and interest payment on bonds and notes, as well as mandatory assessments imposed on towns by the county, state, or federal government. Now on to the budget. This process started in August of 2022. It started with our department heads for all the departments within the town. It then went to our town manager, the Board of Selectmen, and then to the Budget Committee. We feel that this is a very good budget. It has gone up from, the difference is $610,611 from the 2022 budget to this budget of 2023, which is a 5.7% increase. The driving factors for this are that there is an increase in electricity and fuel, increase in property and liability insurance. There is a PFOA, PFAS investigation and work. This is due to water contamination near the area around the fire department. There is a scheduled replacement of critical computer equipment. There's an increase in salaries due to prior year police contract, higher paving costs due to cost of oil, inflation, and fuel costs. Snow removal and related costs have increased, and debt services increased to cover prior year vote on the ladder truck. We've worked extremely well with the Board of Selectmen, department heads, and the Budget Committee. We feel like this is a good budget. It's a very tight budget, and like I said, it is up 5.7% from last year.
Thank you, Katie. Any questions? Anyone approaching the mic? Seeing no one coming forward, that all... Oh, we have someone. Yes, sir.
Hi, Ryan LeBrecq, 174 Main Street.
Raise it up if you want.
That's okay. What has the town and the budget committee done this year to reduce costs across different areas as opposed to increase costs? Understanding that there are increased costs right now, but what have we done to pull back in other areas to offset it? Thanks.
So, unfortunately, there are areas that increase that I mentioned is really the only driving factors. Everything else is, oh, thank you. Everything else is just to maintain as what we did last year. But I will defer to Mr. Colby as far as there's really not much that we could have cut or reduced. Oh, I'll let Jay. He's raising his hand.
I'll recognize Jay and then the town manager, Mr. Colby, if he wishes to comment. Mr. DeRoche.
One of the things that we did to try to help reduce the cost of the electricity was to enter into an energy aggregation with Sprague. So we're able to get a reduced rate in our electricity. That was one way that we reduced some of our electricity costs. So through the budget process, once we entered into this agreement, we're able to reduce that budgeted number. Although it wasn't significant, it was still higher than what our average kilowatt hour was over the last year. But it wasn't as high as that 25-cent increase that everyone is seeing. So we're able to get that energy aggregation to help reduce the impact of it. So we did reduce the numbers there. We spent, when it came to plowing, we ahead of time bought sand and salt at a reduced rate because we have a salt garage now that we can store it and buy it ahead of time. So that was a couple ways that we were able to bring the cost down a little bit. But I'll defer to Mr. Colby with any other.
Mr. Colby.
I mean, I can add, within like the police department budget and the general government building budget, we've either delayed like preventive maintenance type things where some things we'll do 2 per year that we've cut down where necessary to 1 per year, or we've put off other purchases out of the police department budget, for instance, for another year. So because of this increase.
How has the solar panels that were installed reduced cost? Do we have data from that expenditure that was done over the last few years?
Mr. Colby.
I believe with that line item, we cut that in half. But we're only just coming up on a full year worth of that data. So we felt we could cut that in half. But obviously it's offset by the increase, with the electricity rates. So.
And with the annex, it was originally indicated that the annex was going to be used temporarily for overflow because due to COVID. Now that COVID is, not going to say it's no longer a factor because that's not a true statement, but now that COVID is subsided, what's the plan for moving the staff back from the annex to the town hall where it was previously?
Currently, there is no plan. We did have an insurance review here, and this building is not safe to house people on the third floor because of only one egress. So we're currently keeping the annex open for the time being.
So if that was the case, why not at the time, instead of explaining it away as a COVID issue, why didn't we indicate what the real problem was?
That was, I mean, previous town manager and the like, I can't speak to that, so.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Name and address.
Nolan Pelletier, 24 North Ave. I would like to move to amend the value of $11,317,457 be changed to $11,062,817, and I'll put that in writing.
Do you have it in writing?
I'll put it in writing.
I have a motion to change the amount of the operating budget to the same amount, I believe, of the default budget. Do we have a second on that? Name and address?
Second.
Can you give your name and address for the clerk?
Jessica Pelletier, 24 North Ave.
Well, I'm waiting for your signed motion, then I'm going to ask you if you want to speak to it.
My name on the motion,
Yes, you have to sign your name at the bottom, sir.
address as well, just name.
Just your name. We have your address on the record. Thank you. Now you wish to speak to your motion.
Plaistow is made up of a large proportion of blue-collar working families. A lot of us are tightening our belts due to inflation, rise of goods, pretty much everything, energy costs, and I think the town should do the same. You're going to impact your community. I've been here for 20-something years. Like everything, our taxes have gone up. Part of the reason I moved here was lower taxes, one of the reasons, and we all need to keep our taxes low, and we need to give, families need the relief. We can't just keep increasing every single year. So that's why I want to keep the operating budget the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on the motion to amend?
Just a quick question with the
Name and
motion.
address.
Yep, Dennis Heffernan, 4 Secluded Circle.
Thank you.
With that motion, would that cover the contractual obligations that the town has?
Mr. Colby, are you able to answer that question?
I mean, the default budget is the previous year's budget with adjustments for CBA, debt service, and the like. So that would take into account those that we are contractually obligated to. It would not take into account increases in fuel or any of those inflationary costs. It doesn't take into account that. So electricity, for instance.
Anyone else wish to speak to the motion to amend? The motion again is to alter the total amount of the operating budget to $11,062,187, making it the same as the default budget. Any more discussion on that article? So all in favor of the motion?
Mr. Moderator, just a question, point of order. If someone wanted to do a secret ballot, just if you could reiterate those rules one more time.
Five voters in writing that need to be here, made before we call the vote that I was just about to call. So I don't see anybody jumping up, so I'm going to call the vote. So if you're in favor of Mr. Pelletier's motion to amend, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Abstained?
Abstain.
So we have one abstention for the record. The motion fails. Are there any other motions? I'll ask two more times. Any other motions on the operating budget? Any other motions on the operating budget? Hearing no further motions, the operating budget, Article P-2302, will appear on the official ballot as written. Amendment failed. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Katie. Moving on, operating budget, Water Department, Article P-2303. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget for the Water Department, not including appropriations by special warrant article and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $494,090. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget will be $483,390 with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with the RSA 40:13 Roman X and X1 to take up the issue of a revised budget only. Majority vote required. Do I have a motion to place this article on the written ballot as written?
I'll make that motion.
Made by Mr. DeRoche. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Coy. Discussion, I believe our chairman, Mr. DeRoche, will speak on this article. Jay?
Yeah, this is our water department budget. Basically, this is to help run and maintain the system that has recently been turned on to our residents in town. This encompasses our fire suppression as well as potable water to the residents that have connected to the new system. There is a slight increase over last year of, I think it looks like $10,000, $11,000. As you'll see in the article itself, it says withdrawal from the Water Enterprise Fund. The Water Enterprise Fund is fully funded by the subscribers of the water system. So this is not impacting your regular taxes. So I'm not connected to the water system right now. So I would myself support this because it's benefiting the residents of this town, but it does not impact my taxes in that way. So.
Thank you, Mr. DeRoche. And let me finish reading the bottom of the article that will show on your warrant. That, as was mentioned, the total appropriation is $494,090. Withdrawal from the Water Enterprise Fund, $494,090. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation. The balance in the Water Enterprise Fund was $526,633 as of December 31st, 2022. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 700. The prior article was on the budget was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee the same vote 700. Any further discussion on the Water Department Operating Fund?
I just wanted to add about the balance of that. So over the years, you'll see that balance increase as we plan for future expansion of the water line to other areas of town. So over the years, you'll see that increase. So.
Yes, sir. Name and address again.
Ryan, 174 Main. On the fund, the 526,000, whatever that balance is that before the 494 or after the 494 comes out?
That's the total amount in there now. So it would be there would be 190 something thousand left. Once
Okay, so when the water system was proposed, it was, like you had said, always indicated that the users of the water system will be paying for the water system. So that balance has continually dropped significantly because there have been no users. Now that there are users, we're down to a $100,000 balance. What's the participation rate at this point, number of connections to date, and what's the proposed number of connections by the end of the year? And will that fund be replenished in order to pay next year's budget when the time comes?
So it's a lot of questions there. I don't have the exact numbers, but the current phase of turning on the system is making sure all of our MBTE impacted residents are connected to the water system. Also, other residents have the ability to connect to the system now. I believe the number for the MBTE was somewhere around 79 to 82 or 83 users. We are talking with other water companies that are in town to connect other areas of town, so that will impact another 170 residents once they connect to the system as well. So it's not going to happen overnight because only certain areas of town have the water system. So, and we have to build up that pool to obviously continue to expand to the rest of the residents in town. So, Mr. Colby, you have anything to add?
I'll recognize Mr. Colby, our town manager.
I want to address one of your statements. You said that the fund balance of this fund has gone down significantly over the years. That is incorrect. If anything, it is increasing. And yes, there will be revenues that will also be generated to help offset that 494. So we would anticipate at the end of 2023, barring any significant issues, that it would be higher than the $526,000.
What happens when if it is not higher than the established budget?
Then it would come, the difference of expenses versus revenues would come out of that fund balance of 526,000. So if we, for instance, spend 400 but only raise 300, then the fund balance would decrease by $100,000 and be 426,000 at the end of next year.
If you overrun the balance, what happens to the overrun at that point?
I'm not following. Which balance are you overrunning?
So right now there's 100 and something thousand left in the fund, right? And there's a $500,000. Well, after the 500's taken out for 2023, right?
Well, it's not really taken out. It sits there. The 494, we're anticipating $494,000 in revenues to offset that.
So throughout the year, the 494 is going to be expended against the balance in the fund.
Yes.
At the end of the year, saying that we're going to spend 494,000, there's going to be money coming into the fund as well, obviously, because you're going to have participation. So at the end of 2023, if the balance is $322,000 and the budget for 2024 is $500,000, and there's not enough money in the fund to cover the 2024 budget, what happens at that point?
We would raise the fees to cover the expenses. No money will come from taxes. We will raise the water fees. In a worst case scenario, which won't happen, we would raise the water fees to cover the expenses.
Okay. So currently there's 80 customers connected? That
approximately.
Right.
By the springtime, we anticipate another 200 customers to be hooked in addition. So we should land somewhere between 300 to 400 customers.
Okay. And the other question I have, of the 494, what's the, in general, not in detail, how much of that is staff labor comparative to maintenance costs?
Staff labor is probably 10% of that. I would say $50,000, $60,000.
Okay, and the balance is, what are the major expenditures for the water department?
The purchase of water. That is probably 80% of the budget.
Okay.
Is the purchase.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Anyone else wish to speak on this article? One more time. Anyone else wish to speak? Article P 2303. Yes, ma'am. Name and address.
Yep. Kate Sherman DeRoche, 20 Sunrise Terrace. I'd like to restrict reconsideration on Article P 2302 and P 2303.
That would be a great motion if I can finish with 2303. So if you just wait a second. I know, you're
right
jumping.
at the end.
That's it. You guys are hopping today in the
Try
cold. So hearing nobody else approaching the mic on P2303, that will appear on the official ballot as written now.
Now I'd like to restrict reconsideration on Article P 2302 and P 2303.
I have a motion to restrict reconsideration on Article P2302 and P2303. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Katie Knudsen. Any discussion?
Nolan Pelletier, 24 North Ave. I believe that we should not remove these for reconsideration. Depending on what goes on, we may want to revisit these. So I urge you to leave everything open until the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor of that motion to restrict reconsideration, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Abstained? The ayes have it. Those two articles will be restricted from reconsideration. Moving on, collective bargaining agreements, CBA, Town Union. Article P-2304. Shall the Town of Plaistow vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement, CBA, reached between the Town of Plaistow and the Plaistow Town Unit Teamsters Local 633, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. Fiscal year 23-24, $31,932. Fiscal year 24-25, $51,354. Fiscal year 25-26, $36,268. And further to raise and appropriate the sum of $31,932 for 2023. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 700. Do I have a motion to place this on the written warrant as written?
So moved.
Made by Mr. DeRoche. I have a second. Seconded by Mr. Coy. I believe Mr. DeRoche will speak on this. And for the record, it's a collective bargaining agreement. The language and the wording is set by law, so it's not amendable. Not amendable, but to speak on it, Mr. DeRoche.
Yes, this is the CBA for our town unit. The town unit includes our assessing clerk, health officer, recreation director, building inspector, code enforcement officer, welfare director, deputy tax collector, assistant town clerk, highway foreman, highway laborer, maintenance supervisor, and maintenance worker custodians. So negotiations were had to bring these positions up to a median level, so that we're competitive with other towns. As many towns are struggling with, and businesses elsewhere, we're struggling to hire folks to help provide the services to our residents. So part of the reasoning for this was to help increase those salaries for our employees that are working for the town. So I don't know if there are any other discussion on that, but that's basically what that entails.
Any questions or discussion? Can be discussed, just can't be amended.
No amendments. I got it. What should happen if this fails? What would be the ramifications?
Thank you, Mr. Pelletier. If it fails, then you go to the next article, which is the language set by law that enables the town to have a separate meeting to discuss it in future. And they will probably renegotiate or try to renegotiate with the unions and then call a second meeting only for the cost items for the amount of money. So that's what happens if P2305 fails.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So if that fails and they go into a meeting, will you have to call another vote to get that?
Be a whole new advertised regular meeting like today.
Yep.
And they'll have a whole town meeting, just like
Whole
today.
town meeting?
Yeah, they
So
can't
this
do it
wouldn't,
on their own.
so this wouldn't be on the ballot. Like if this passes, it's a non-issue and that moves forward. You guys, if it doesn't, then you guys meet and then there will be another vote or will only be done at a meeting. I'm just trying to.
The vote and notification. And you could almost say you're going to have a separate warrant for that article. And you'd be called in here or someplace to vote on it.
Thank you.
Now I don't have to explain P2306, but...
You're welcome. Me too. Thank you.
P2305, being non-amendable, will appear on the written ballot as written. Now, P2306, we still need to go through it. Yes.
I think you're on 04.
Oh, I'm on 04? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So that was 04. So P2304 will appear on the official ballot as written. Now, P2305, the special town meeting for defeated collective bargaining agreement. Article P2305, shall the town, if Article P2304 is defeated, authorize the Board of Selectmen to call one special meeting at its option to address warrant Article P2304 cost items only. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400. Motion to place this on the written ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Made by Mr. DeRoche, second by Mr. Coy. I don't believe, Mr. DeRoche, you need to speak to this. We've covered it. So that's in the event the previous article fails, you will hear of a new special town meeting. And again, to just discuss the dollar numbers. That's what cost items means, to discuss the dollar numbers. Okay, next. So that will appear on the ballot. It's language written, required by law. P2305. Replace voting machines, Article P2306. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $12,000 for the purpose of replacing voting machines used to count ballot in town, school, county, state, and federal elections? Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 700. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. DeRoche, and I have a second. Second by Mr. Coy. I think, Mr. Coy, you're going to speak on this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. The Ballot Law Commission has the authority to certify mechanical ballot counting devices for use in New Hampshire elections. The commission has been considering new devices as the older presently authorized AccuVote devices are coming to the end of their useful life. This warrant article will provide the funds to purchase new ballot counting machines once the Ballot Law Commission makes a final decision on the next authorized device to be used, which is something we probably anticipate, I would say, before the next big presidential election.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this?
So this is something that's going to be mandated by the state?
I can answer that, yes.
Okay. So is the state going to provide any funding towards this?
At this point, as the town moderator, I have not been advised that the state is going to give us any funds. There's been some discussion at the state level whether they can use ARPA funds, American Recovery Plan Act funds for it, and it's being explored. But at this point, we haven't been guaranteed anything. And for the sake of all of our voters and citizens, none of the new proposed machines are hooked up to the internet. And it's against the law to hook them up to the internet. So for voter safety, they're not hooked up. Our machine is being serviced by a company in Salem, New Hampshire called LHS. In another year, they will cease maintaining the machines. And as was mentioned by Mr. Coy, the Ballot Law Commission is going to say, well, if they can't be maintained, you need to get new ones.
And with the opera funds, do we still have money left in that?
I don't think we have money left in it, but I can ask our town manager. I'm talking about the state.
I'm saying the town. Does the town?
I don't know about the town. Greg, do we have any ARPA funds left?
Yes, we do.
And when do the ARPA funds, when does that run out?
I don't know.
I think it's the end of 2024.
Okay. Thank you.
Jason Dumas, 6 Pine View. Couple questions. Why is this not like all the other warrant articles that are not being raised with or using the general funds, unassigned balance?
This is a one-time expenditure. We felt that it was something we wanted to place in front of the voters to make a decision on, whether they wanted to fund this. So we haven't considered pulling it from the unassigned fund balance.
Well, we'd still vote on it. It would just be pulled from the general fund after the election, correct? So I'd like to make a amendment to this, same verbiage, as long as it's withdrawn from the general fund with no amount of taxes being raised from 2023.
I'll second it.
Who seconded?
Nolan.
Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $12,000 for the purpose of replacing voting machines must be used to count ballots in town, school, county, state, and federal elections. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation. $12,000 to be withdrawn from the unassigned fund balance. Amount to be raised by 2022, 0. Signed by Jason. I'm going to ask a question for Greg, our town manager. Can we do that at this meeting, you think, to change that? Okay. Just wanted to make sure it was appropriate. So we have a first and a second to amend as I read. Wish to speak on the amendment? Anybody wish to speak on the amendment?
I just want to speak on the topic itself. On the amendment, sorry. So, John Salerno, 4 Buttonwood Farm. What's wrong with the current machines we have now?
They're going to cease to be maintained, and we pay money every year to have a company maintain them to make sure they're accurately reflecting the votes that you all make, that we put through the machines. And once they are ceased to be maintained, we can't validate the accuracy.
So when
and
are they?
It's the State Ballot Law Commission that approves what machines we can use. So when the state comes out and says you can't use those machines anymore, we either don't have an election or we have to get new machines. We're going to be forced to get new machines.
So are we dependent on one company for this, or is there more than one company that we're going to be looking at?
I'd like to say we look at them all the time, but it's the State Ballot Law Commission and the Secretary of State. They're, for the last 2-3 years, they've been exploring, testing, target marketing different machines from at least 3 different companies. So it's not one company, it's 3. And they will make a decision at the state level which one they're going to say we have to use.
And 100% they are not hooked up to the internet, correct?
Correct.
Because there's been discrepancies in the past, not in Plaistow, but around the country.
That was a budget. That was an election law change that the legislator, Mr. Major, and I supported, I believe, a couple of years ago. That by law they can't hook up. The machines cannot hook up to the internet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Major.
Norman Major, 12 Kingston Road, System Moderator. It's very important that we pass this article. Why is it? It's because the company that made this machine stopped making this machine years ago, and they've been maintaining it. And they said now that they're having difficulties getting parts. So if we have any failures on these machines, we're out of business. I've been around when we didn't have machines to count. and we get through like 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning hand counting things. The town has grown an awful lot since then. I don't think there's anybody here that would want to stay around at night to hand count these votes. So please support this article.
Anyone else to speak? So we have the motion. It's just a question of where the money's coming out of. Yes?
Would it be appropriate to ask a question on not on the amendment, but on the article itself at this time?
I call a vote on the amendment, and then we'll go back to the article as amended.
Okay.
So if no one else has anything to say on the amendment, all in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Abstained. So amendment fails. So we're back to the article as written. Mr. Pelletier.
You have an amount of 12,000, but you don't know what machines you're going to purchase yet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Then how do you know that this?
We've been given preliminary estimates on what the cost of a single machine would be for one of the 2 or 3 vendors that the state is vetting right now.
And how many machines would this purchase?
This would be 2.
Just 2 machines.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the article as written? Hearing none, no one approaching the mic. Article P-2306, replace voting machines, will appear on the written ballot as written. Moving on, contingency fund, RSA 31:98A. Article P-23-07, shall the town vote to establish a contingency fund for the current year for unanticipated expenses that may arise, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $80,000 to be deposited into the fund. The sum to come from the general fund unassigned fund balance. Any appropriation left in the fund at the end of the year will lapse to the general fund. Use of these funds will be pursuant to RSA 31:98A and RSA 32:11. Majority vote required. Total appropriation $80,000. Withdrawn from the general fund unassigned fund balance $80,000. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation. The balance of the general fund unassigned fund balance was $2,534,815 as of December 31, 2022. This was recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 600. Do I have a motion to place this on the ballot as written?
I'll make that motion.
Made by Mr. DeRoche. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Coy. I believe, Mr. Britton, you're going to speak on this article?
Yeah, the explanation is the establishment of the contingency fund gives the Board of Selectmen another tool to manage the town in an efficient manner. If its unanticipated expenses arise, the Board of Selectmen would have a source of funds to pay the unanticipated expenses. The fund must be reestablished each year and cannot accumulate funds from year to year. Any portion left in the fund at the end of the year will lapse into the general fund. I think an easiest way to explain this is if something catastrophic was to happen that we didn't plan on. I guess one would be is if the septic system died out back here. It'd probably eat up the bigger portion of that. And we have no way of planning for that or knowing it's going to happen. But it's that type of item that we just can't plan and don't know about. So.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
So currently, if say this did not pass, there is absolutely no mechanism to resolve issues that arise, because I believe there is.
Well, there's a way to do it, but other things would suffer for it. You know, we'd have to take the money from something.
You'd have to work within the budget, correct?
Right.
Right. Well, I'm up here. I'm just going to make an amendment. I'd like to amend this to 0, and I'll put it in writing.
So we're expecting a written motion by Mr. Pelletier to change the total appropriation to 0. Withdraw from the general fund, I assume 0. No amount from taxation, 0, so I'll wait for the written motion. Do I have a second on his motion?
Second. I just have a quick question. So,
Can we wait till he gives me the motion?
okay, no problem.
So you may speak.
Has there ever been an instance where an emergency has come up that the town has not been able to deal with, lacking this contingency fund being in place? Has it ever been a problem?
We've always had a contingency fund.
Isn't this establishing the contingency fund, or is this adding to it?
So every year,
Every year we have.
Every
You have to
year-
establish it every year?
yes.
And
Okay.
what's left over that out of the 80,000 is news goes back into the general fund.
Okay.
Right now, there's,
Like 2.5?
yeah.
$2,534,815. It's in your warrant. Mr. Pelletier, can you sign your last name to the,
And
we know who you are, but
pleasure.
in general, how much of the contingency fund is used
thank you.
roughly yearly?
It varies from year to year. Do you have what we've used this year?
Well, this past year, it was the source of the starting of the investigation over at the fire department for the PFAS and PFOA, and we've expended probably 60 of the 80, I think, during 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Can I speak to my amendment, please?
Yes.
We have $2.5 million in our general fund. That's $2.5 million that we've kind of essentially, us taxpayers, are overpaid. So it's in there. We don't need to appropriate those funds. If an issue comes up, we have the means to actually make this happen. We can do it through the appropriate channels. We don't need to keep siphoning off taxpayers' money and then dropping it into the general fund. Thank you.
Appreciate Mr. Pelletier's comments, but now he's got me confused. This warrant article, as I read it, doesn't get any new taxation. It takes the 80,000 from that 2,500,000, so it will just reduce that by 80,000. It doesn't call on the taxpayers to pay any more currently. You understood that? Okay. Mr. DeRoche?
The selectmen in the town follow a policy where we try to keep a set amount of money in the general fund, and this is recommended by the state. A lot of the money that is used out of this fund to help offset the cost of these warrants eventually go back to when we go to set the tax rate. So at the end of the year, when we're setting the tax rate, the money we use for these warrant articles where we pull it out, we can use that to help offset the tax rate and keep it down as well. And we can also use surplus or money from the unexpended fund balance to help keep the tax rate down, which we did this year. We applied, I think, $400,000. And then also from the warrant articles that were used last year, that we used out of the unexpended fund balance, that also goes into the calculation as well. So we don't want to leave ourselves in the lurch, so to speak. So we have to carry some type of balance. If there is some type of catastrophic issue that we were unable to, we'd have to overspend our entire budget. We would have to go to the state to get approval to use the money in this unassigned fund balance to keep that. So over time, there is surplus that is generated from year to year. We didn't just generate $2.5 million over the last 5 years. This has been something that's been ongoing for a number of years. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit more. So.
Did I see another hand here? No?
Oh, actually.
Yes, sir.
Richard Anthony. I just want to emphasize that, again, we did use the selectmen did vote to use $400,000 to keep the tax rate level. And I think people should understand that the surpluses that are generated that are being used, let's say perhaps to fund warrant articles, can be used, all right, to keep the tax rate stable. All right. So in that sense, this is the first time since 2017 that the town is elected to do that. So I think that's noteworthy, and it should be that the money there that is generated, that is surplus, can be used to keep the tax rate stable.
I mean, when you go and you vote on these, it says, no new taxes, but it's actually withdrawing from our fund. So I think that people have this, there's some kind of disconnect with some people that money isn't free and it comes from somewhere. So that's what I'm saying. Like if people are like, oh, there's no new taxation, I'm going to vote yes, but it's actually coming out of our fund. So we are actually using money. It's just not an additional cost to us. That's what I understand how it works, but I don't think everyone does, to be honest with you.
If you look at the audited financials that are posted on the town's website, there's an annex that shows the surpluses, the unexpended funds from the year that's being audited, and the amount of, let's say, revenue coming in. All right, so you can see what we haven't expended, let's say, in a year when you go and you look at those audited financials. I mean, so it's to the tune of between $200,000, $300,000 of surplus generation each year. So,
Yes, sir.
Jason Dumas, 6 Pine View. What was the use of it for last year? How much did we use out of the fund?
I believe the manager said 60,000 towards the PFAS and PFOS investigation at the fire department.
Okay. And if this does fail, can we use the general funds for a contingency? Or
I'll ask the manager to answer that.
No, you cannot. Even though there's $2.5 million in the fund balance, you need an appropriation to have the authority to spend it.
Perfect.
Without that authority, you cannot spend the $2.5 million.
Perfect. Thanks.
On the motion to amend, down to 0. Seeing no one approaching the mic, if you're in favor of the motion to amend to change the total appropriation to 0, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Abstained. Motion fails. We're back to the main motion, P2307. Any further discussion on the main motion? Seeing no one approaching the mic, P2307 will appear on the ballot as written.
Mr. Moderator, before we move on, I'd like to make a motion to restrict for reconsideration Article P 2306 and Article P 2307.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Seconded. So we have a motion to restrict reconsideration of P 2306 and P 2307. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Abstained. Ayes have it. Those are restricted from reconsideration. Next article, establish a police vehicle capital fund. Article P-2308. Shall the town vote to establish a police vehicle capital reserve fund for the purpose of purchasing or leasing new or used police vehicles, and to raise and appropriate $60,000 to be deposited into this account, with $60,000 withdrawn from the unassigned fund balance. The Board of Selectmen shall be the agents authorized to expend these funds. The Capital Reserve Fund is being created pursuant to RSA 35:1. Majority vote required. Total appropriation $60,000. Withdrawn from the general fund unassigned fund balance $60,000. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation, 0. The balance in the general fund unassigned fund balance was $2,534,815 as of 12/31/22, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 500 and the Budget Committee 600. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Jonathan Gifford. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Britton. Mr. Gifford, I believe you're going to speak on this article.
Actually, I'd like to make a motion to increase the transfer from $60,000 to $100,000.
Do I have a second on Mr. Gifford's motion?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Britton. Can I have that motion in writing and signed, please? So the motion made and seconded is to increase the amount of the transfer and use of the fund balance from 60,000 to 100,000. Do you wish to speak on your motion, Mr. Gifford?
Well, the creation of this deposit and increase to the capital reserve fund will allow an orderly replacement of our police vehicles by only using this capital reserve money. It helps to level our annual yearly taxes, and these funds will be invested in an interest-bearing account and can only be withdrawn by the majority of the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. Anyone to speak on the motion to amend?
Thank you. Dennis Heffernan for Secluded Circle. Can you just talk a little bit to why you want to increase this by 40,000 at this time? Thank you.
I'll refer to.
We'll recognize the town manager to answer that question.
And I'm going to give the explanation. This Article 2308, 2309, and 2310 should be looked at together. We currently have a fire and police outside detail fund whereby all of the money that is generated by the police and fire personnel for doing outside details, which is, if the electric company is in or if they're providing coverage for a dance recital, they request coverage from the police and fire to be there. That money goes into a separate fund. This fund has built up to a balance in excess of $200,000 over the course of several years. The idea is, in order for us to access that excess money, we can only do it by discontinuing the current fund, reestablishing the same fund, but then also to utilize that excess money to put it in to be able to buy a police vehicle. So what will end up happening if these three warrants pass, the 230 some odd $1,000 will come into the general fund as revenue. We will then take, if the amendment passes, $100,000 of that money, put it into a capital reserve fund, and then take the other $100,000 to put it back into the fund so that we have the seed money to keep that fund going. So the net effect would be that revenue, excess revenue, would come into the general fund to help offset the taxes for everybody. So you got to really look at the three of them. This isn't costing anything. It is utilizing the outside detail money that is there that cannot be accessed or utilized any other way. Otherwise, the fund would stay and we'd have to pay for the operations of the fund. We couldn't buy any vehicles with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any discussion on the motion to amend?
Julie LeBrecq, 174 Main Street. I still don't understand where the additional, I understood what you just said, but why are we amending to increase it? What, is there specific vehicles that need maintenance, or what is driving that?
We just replaced a couple of cruisers and the cost is in excess of $60,000. So by only putting in $60,000, it really wouldn't be enough, nor would there be any to carry forward into a future year. So that's the idea with utilizing a little bit more of that, so that there's enough to cover a replacement, which they are on a rotating basis, and we do have cruisers that need to be replaced.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to ask a question of Greg, our town manager. So if I take 08, 09, and 10 and assume the motion passes to make that 100,000, if we have 200,000 in that account, these three articles equal the 200,000 in that account.
There is more than 200,000 in that account. I gave 246.
Yeah. 25.
Yeah, 246,925. So we would utilize 200 of the 246, and the 46 would come into the general fund to help offset taxes next year.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the motion to amend to 100,000? Seeing nobody at the mic, all in favor of the motion to amend, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Abstained. Ayes have it. Now we're back to the motion as amended. Where am I? P2308 as amended. Any discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing no one approaching the mic, P2308 as amended will appear on the written ballot. Moving on. Discontinue the Police and Fire Detail Revolving Fund. Article P2309. Shall the town vote to discontinue the Police and Fire Detail Revolving Fund and place the total sum of the fund balance at the time of discontinuance into the town's general fund? This article shall be null and void if P2310 fails. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 4-0-0. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that
Mr.
motion.
DeRoche, I have a second. Mr. Coy. Mr. DeRoche, I believe you're speaking on that.
What he said. I don't know what more explanation I can offer other than what the town manager just spoke about. So basically, we'd be dissolving this and moving the funds and reusing those same funds. So
Any discussion on P2309?
Ryan Lebrecht, 174 Main Street. Just for my understanding, so this fund, someone calls, they need a police detail, police department's officer sent over. That officer's wages cost something to the town, right? There's a cost coming back to the town from whoever requested that detail, which flows into this $246,000 fund. Where are the wages? So is that 246 profit over and above the cost for the detail, or is that 246 not include the actual labor costs?
Over and above the cost. So it's extra money after everything's paid.
Okay, so the detail itself, if it's whatever, just throwing out a number, if it's $75 for an hour, and $50 is the cost, then the $25 goes into this fund.
Correct.
Essentially. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on P2309? Seeing no one approaching the mic, Article P2309 will appear on the ballot as written. Establish a police and fire detail revolving fund, P2310. Shall the town vote to establish a police and fire detail revolving fund pursuant to RSA 31:95H for the purpose of purchasing, leasing, maintaining, and repairing all vehicles assigned for detail use, including uniforms and other necessary expenses? All revenues received from outside detail services will be deposited into the fund, and the money in the fund shall be allowed to accumulate from year to year and shall not be considered part of the town's general fund balance. The town treasurer shall have custody of all monies in the fund and shall pay out the same upon order of the governing body, and no further approval is required by the legislative body to expend. Such funds may be expended only for the purpose for which the fund was created. Shall the town further vote to raise and appropriate $100,000 to be deposited into the fund, with the amount coming from the general fund unassigned fund balance? This warrant article shall be null and void if Article P2309 does not pass. Majority vote required. Total appropriation $100,000. Withdrawn from the general fund unassigned balance $100,000. Amount to be raised by 2023 taxation 0. The balance of the general fund unassigned fund balance was $2,534,815 as of December 31st, 2022. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 4-0-0 and the Budget Committee 6-0-0. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that
A
motion.
motion by Mr. DeRoche, seconded by Mr. Coy. I don't know if you need to speak any more, Mr. DeRoche, on this. It's been said.
Yeah.
So any discussion on P2310?
Ryan, 174 Main Street. So I guess what I'm confused about with the 246, I understand it's basically a savings account, essentially. But if our police budget went up $100,000 for the year, why wouldn't we look to revenue from the police department to offset that $100,000 to keep the budget level instead of increasing the budget and costing the town more money?
Would you like to speak to that?
So with this fund, we're capping it, correct? At 150?
No.
We're not capping it? Okay.
No.
So This money only is used for outside details and the purchase of any equipment, that being vehicles that are specific to outside detail, anything that's needed for any of the outside details, flags, cones, etc. If we weren't considered using the revenue from this to help offset the police budget, we would have to put it in front of the voters again to dissolve the account and do the same process.
Thank you, Mr. DeRoche. Any further discussion on P2310? Seeing no one approaching the mic, Article P2310 will appear on the ballot as written. Moving on.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to restrict reconsideration for Articles P2308, P2309, and P2310.
I have a second by Ms. Knutson. Motion to restrict reconsideration, P2308, 09, and 010. Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstained. So the ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on. Deposit to Highway Equipment Trust Fund, Article P-2311. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be deposited into the previously established Highway Department Equipment Expendable Trust Fund? Majority vote required. The balance in the Highway Equipment Trust Fund was $107,485 as of December 31st, 2022. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 400, on the Budget Committee, 600. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Made by Mr.
Second.
DeRoche, seconded by Mr. Coy. Mr. Britton, are you going to speak on this?
I am. Capital Improvement Plan, reference HID, timely deposits into the Highway Department Equipment Expendable Trust Fund will allow for the orderly replacement of highway vehicles using the trust fund money, which helps level the yearly tax impact. These funds will invest in an interest-bearing account and can be withdrawn by a majority of the Board of Selectmen. The next planned expenses occur in 2024, $20,000 for replacement of a landscaping trailer, 2025, $110,000 for the replacement of a 2010 Ford New Holland brush cutter, and $50,000 for the replacement of a 2015 six-wheel International dump truck body sand and salt attachment. This is basically what this boils down to. If you don't take and accept planning this way, then at one point in time, there'll be just one giant chunk of money taken out, and we'll have to play ball that way. To me, it's nothing more than a savings account so that you don't have to get whacked all at once.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. Any discussion on 2311? Seeing no one approaching the mic, Article P-2311 will appear on the ballot as written. Moving on. Deposit to Building Expendable Trust Fund, Article P-2312. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $40,000 to be deposited into the previously established Building Expendable Trust Fund? Majority vote required. Total appropriation, $40,000. Withdrawn from the general fund, unassigned fund balance, $40,000. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation, $0. The balance in the Building Expendable Trust Fund was $24,795 as of December 31st, 2022. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 400, on the Budget Committee, 600. Motion to place this article on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Made by Mr. DeRoche, seconded by Mr. Coy. Mr. Gifford, are you speaking on this?
So the intent of this article is basically a maintenance plan for all of our buildings and the capital maintenance and flooring, siding, roofing, painting, site maintenance, all the buildings expansions and reconfigurations over the year, not limited to HVAC, electrical, plumbing, basically taking care of our buildings. And it's where we all work. It's where we all have to be safe. So I just can't see any reason why this can't go through.
Thank you, Mr. Gifford. Any more discussion on P2312? Seeing no one approaching the mic, Article P2312 will appear on the ballot as written.
Bob, I'd like to make a motion to restrict reconsideration on P2311 and P2312.
I have a motion made and seconded to restrict reconsideration on 2311 and 2312. Any discussion? Ms. Knudsen? No discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstained. The ayes have it. Moving on. Deposit to Library Capital Reserve Fund. Article P-23-13. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $45,000 to be deposited into the previously established Library Capital Reserve Fund? Majority vote required. The balance of the Library Capital Reserve Fund was $70,783 as of December 31, 2022. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 400, and the Budget Committee, 600. Again, motion to place this on the ballot as written.
So moved.
Made by Mr. DeRoche, seconded by Mr. Coy. Mr. DeRoche, are you speaking on that?
Yes, so there's some years ago, there was a study done by the library about improvements that are needed over time at the library itself. So this is all part of our capital improvement plan. So on the schedule, I believe they have some roofing and some other maybe boiler items on the plate for the next couple of years that are coming up. So we're trying to put money aside for that. The estimated expenses for redoing the roof over there, the building is 20 years old. We're coming up on trying to replace the roof. It's probably going to cost around $100,000. So we're just putting money away to be able to pay for the anticipated expense of some of this upkeep and maintenance to the building. So,
thank you. Any further discussion on P2313? Seeing nobody approaching the mic, Article P2313 will appear on the ballot as written. Moving on, deposit to Energy Capital Reserve Fund. Article P-2314. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be deposited into the previously established Energy Capital Reserve Fund? Majority vote required. The balance of the Energy Capital Reserve Fund was $34,086 as of December 31, 2022. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 400, and the Budget Committee, 600. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Made by Mr. DeRoche,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Coy. Mr. Coy, are you going to speak on this?
I am. The Energy Committee, what they're doing, they're focusing on installing solar panels on as many town buildings as possible, as you know, what makes sense. Also, I know the committee's working on looking at the landfill to put solar panels out on the landfill as well. But the problem is you need upfront money to get these projects rolling, and that's really what this fund will do, so they can keep going on, so we can save money on electricity. As we know, electricity, you have to open up your bill every month, and you see the cost there.
Thank you, Mr. Coy. Any discussion?
Was there a warrant article last year for the landfill solar, or was I mistaken?
There was one a few years ago for the cap on the landfill had to be capped.
Okay. I just remember, I remember last year they were talking about solar at the last deliberative. I didn't know what that was for the highway building. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing no one approaching the mic, Article P-2314 shall appear on the ballot as written. Have a motion?
Now I'll make a motion to restrict reconsideration of P-2314 and P-2313, I believe.
We have a motion to restrict on 13 and 14, seconded by Ms. Knudsen. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstained? Ayes have it. Moving on. Deposit to Transportation Infrastructure Capital Reserve Fund, Article P-2315. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $40,000 to be deposited into the previously established Transportation Infrastructure Capital Reserve Fund? Majority vote required. The balance in the Transportation Infrastructure Capital Reserve Fund was $75,405 as of December 31st, 2022. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 600. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Yes, we have
Second.
a motion and seconded as usual. Discussion. Mr. Britton, are you speaking on this?
I am. This is basically, the long and short of this is the DOT is willing to get involved with a calming study on this. Our portion would be $20,000, $200,000, I'm sorry. And this is to try to make Main Street a little bit quieter, a little bit easier. Right now, it's a state road. Dump trucks, 18-wheelers, whatever can take and use the main street of Plaistow. We're trying to get it to the point where it won't be as attractive for that type of traffic to come through. Knowing that we've got the school out here and the kids on the road, we're trying to calm that road down quite a bit. And I think that this is a worthwhile deal. It really is, only because we need to do it. And we have no control over this main street because it's a state road. So we can't say to the major trucking firms and things like that, you can't use this road because it's a state road. So as a result, this is the next best thing to try to get a calming study done where it'll be more advantageous for them to take and go out on 125 and stay on 125 than to take and drive through the center of town.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. Discussion.
Jason Newman, 6 Pineview. Main Street's a state road, and it should stay a state road. I'm not interested in spending any more additional funds on a state road than we already do. Taking over that calming study is going to increase our taxes, and I'm not a fan of that.
Well, yes, it will, okay? But the alternative is if we don't contribute to it, then the DOT is not going to do anything to it. So we're going to end up with what we have increasing. I'll give you a quick example. You've got a trucking firm in town that's going to be starting and have trucks come through. You've got 800,000 square foot of a potential huge trucking operation in Kingston, which is going to send hundreds of trucks south. Knowing all of that, they're going to take the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance is Main Street Plaistow. It's just a matter of time before it really gets unbearable out there on Main Street. And I worry more about the kids at Pollard, that are walkers and things like that. So, do I want to spend $200,000? No. I'd like to be able to say to the state, you figure it out and make it better for us. But they won't.
Well, we've already done the Safe Walk to School program, or however that was worded a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We can be proactive by law enforcement controlling Main Street. There's plenty of opportunities to make some corrective action on that. And we already pay for that.
You can by law enforcement, but are you going to keep law enforcement down there all the time? Are you going to take and tie up cruisers and officers on just Main Street? I haven't got the good answer for you.
Oh, I agree.
I really don't. I wish I could magically say, force them out onto 125, but it's not going to happen. And I anticipate the traffic being that 5 years from now, the traffic out there with heavy trucking is going to be huge because it's a path of least resistance.
We just need to make it not the least resistance.
I agree, but I don't know how to do that without this.
Well,
can we perhaps not have this back and forth debate? Thank you. I'll recognize. Let me recognize the selectman, then Mr. Pelletier. Jay.
And so one of the things that's been thrown around over the years is, well, why don't we take ownership of Main Street? And the downside of that is your taxes will go up if we have to take ownership of Main Street. That entails plowing, salting, sanding, maintaining the roads and the sidewalks. So the downside to owning the road, even though we'd have full control of it, is it's going to impact our residents' taxes. this is the path of least resistance, as Mr. Britton uses, that we were able to get a matching grant to help calm Main Street down. And we need to provide, money towards that. So we're saving towards trying to help reduce the impact to our residents. So,
Mr. Pelletier.
thank you.
So is this only restricted to Main Street?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, because I would argue that North Ave is by far busier than Main Street and is also a town road, and you're not taking that into consideration either.
Well, I think that at some, and I'm sorry, I will answer that question. I think that I agree with you 100%. North Ave is a disaster as far as traffic goes. And that corner of North Ave and Main Street is even probably one of the worst corners in town. But it has to be, if you try to eat the whole pie at once, you're going to choke. Eat a piece at a time, and you're going to enjoy it. So I'm hoping to take and eat this a piece at a time.
Yeah, I think the root of the problem would be eliminating North Ave, and then that would definitely eliminate a lot of the traffic off of Main Street. I would say you're actually doing it backwards.
Well, if we're changing Main Street, that's where your traffic from North Ave is headed to. So if Main Street is calmed down, then
I would
presumably
half of the people
Can we have, thank you. Thank you. All questions should be directed through me and not a discussion, debate back and forth. Just like a point of clarification, the matching fund for the traffic study is only from the DOT on the State Road Main Street. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
2 points. One, first, it was mentioned earlier, the Safe Routes to School grant that we got. Wasn't that supposed to accomplish what we're talking about here?
I can't answer that question. Can anybody answer that, Mr. Britton?
That was the start.
Okay.
But far from the finish.
Okay, so this is just adding to that. And I guess my second question would be, as Selectman Britton did comment on, there are some trucking firms that are coming into town and so forth. Does the town have any mechanism to have them contribute to this?
Does our manager have an answer for that?
I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Well,
it was mentioned that Main Street's a state road, so
Well, we
I'm not
did.
quite
There's-
sure we can put up
there's
a
a-
toll booth.
there is a warehouse going in, 300 square foot one on 125. And there was a contribution, I'm trying to remember, I think it might have been 50,000.
Correct.
And that's to go towards a study for traffic as well. So they will help with some of that.
So there is a mechanism where we can look at these businesses that come into town to contribute. I know years ago with Walmart, the town still gets money from them when they moved into town for,
Right.
I think it was police and fire. So that was something that I wanted to make sure, the planning board and the Board of Selectmen are looking at, and getting these businesses that are moving in town should be contributing to this, because they're, causing the majority of this issue. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question.
Name and address.
Sorry, Jessica Pelletier, 24 North Ave. The calming project, it will be the entirety of 125 from, I'm sorry, the entirety of Main Street from one end of 125 to the other end of 125?
They're looking at, in the study, they're looking at from the railroad tracks up to the library portion.
So just that specific area.
Specific.
So that's not going to cut traffic coming from North Ave onto Main Street. They can come onto Main Street and they can still go down a portion of Main Street, left or right, either way.
Correct.
Why is it not the entirety of Main Street?
That I can't answer.
That doesn't make sense to me. Thank you.
That's a good question. I'd like to add a point of order or information to that. A number of years ago, we had a major traffic study of calming at the intersection of Main Street and North Ave. I was on the Plaistow First Committee, and we looked at that. I can't tell you the name of the company that wrote it, but that's probably available. I personally was not in favor of some of their calming methods, which included putting a rotary at the end of North Ave, but it was a major study. That's how I felt. It's like, what? But it was already done a few years ago. Maybe that could be updated. And I don't think the state paid for that. I think we may have when we did the village redistricting down in the village. So maybe the manager or the select board could find that report for you and post it someplace. It was a pretty thick traffic calming report for that end. Yes, sir.
Morning, Patrick Kiley, 110 Main Street. Huge supporter of this being on Main Street. First of all, do see the pedestrian traffic on Main Street all the time, cyclist traffic, et cetera. Very important. 2 points. One, on North Ave, truck traffic is restricted from the Massachusetts side and from the New Hampshire side due to a weight restriction on a bridge that is on the Massachusetts side of North Ave. So there is no through trucking through North Ave as it stands right now. Legally, there is not. So we can talk to Massachusetts about that. However, the second question for the board is, once this study is complete, is the town going to be responsible for any cost related to the construction portion of this project? Thank you.
That's what the $200,000 is going towards. The estimated project was $1 million. We haven't had them in here for a presentation, I think, in a year and a half, Mr. Colby. They should be coming back once we start ramping up. There's supposed to be public hearings to get public input and to include the public in these decisions as well as the Board of Selectmen. So.
Yes, sir.
Ryan Lebrecq, 174 Main Street. So we live probably 40 feet from Main Street, so we've got some pretty firsthand knowledge of this. The truck traffic isn't, in my opinion, contributing to it. For us, it's noise more than traffic. I don't think there's a stupid amount of traffic on Main Street other than there's a lot of noisy traffic. In the wintertime, it's actually pretty good. In the summertime, it's a lot of Harleys coming around the corner. I don't have anything against motorcycles, but a lot of it contributes to speed limit enforcement. As I said, I don't think we enforce it well enough on Main Street. If we kept the speed limits down, then the noise would be down. Also, our own town contributes to it. I mean, we hear the front end loader zipping by our house multiple times every day, it seems. It seems to be a race car for some reason. There's also New England tractor trailer training comes by. They're very quiet. Student drivers learning how to drive trailer trucks, not a big deal. I think enforcement is the key. I don't think we enforce it well enough. If we enforce the rules, just like what was saying, if we enforce the weight restrictions, and I don't know if we have the ability to enforce that if it's a Massachusetts bridge, but if we are enforcing these things, then I think we're calming traffic in and of itself by not enforcing. And I can guarantee you, by the time people hit the Legion coming up Main Street, there's many times it's 40 to 60 miles an hour all day long. Many people on Main Street. I go the speed limit, and I think my wife goes the speed limit, and we piss people off because we're driving 30 miles an hour and they're tailgating us the whole time. So speed limit enforcement would help tremendously. I think we keep studying and studying and studying and studying. Let's enforce the laws that are in place, and maybe that'll help. Thank you.
I would like to reinforce, Nolan Pelletier, 24 North Ave. I'm sure you have that already by now. I'd like to reinforce what he's saying. I mean, as someone who actually has to wait in line to get to his house at the end of his workday, I would argue that North Ave is far more busy than Main Street, and I'm also not complaining about it. I don't know if it would be in order, but I would like to, I don't know if it is, but maybe we should appropriate these funds for a border wall for Massachusetts. Thank you.
Second or what? We need their tax dollars.
It's going to be huge.
Anyone else to speak on 2315? Hearing none, Article P 2315 will appear on the ballot as written. Moving on, deposit to reevaluation capital reserve fund. Article P 2316. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $35,000 to be deposited into the previously established reevaluation capital reserve fund, majority vote required. The balance in the reevaluation capital reserve fund was $34,713 as of December 31st, 2022, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 600. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Made and seconded. Mr. Gifford, are you going to speak on this?
Okay, so as a town, we're required constitutionally and statutory assessments of all of our properties. And that is an expensive undertaking. It has to happen every 5 years. Right now, I think we're in the 75 percentile of what we should be. There's certain criteria that we have to meet, but this is just going to be allocated to that survey that has to happen every 5 years. And basically, it's just building the bank, so it has to happen.
Thank you. Any discussion on this?
Nolan Pelletier, 24 North Ave. Taxation is theft. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing no one approaching the mic, Article P 2316 will appear on the ballot as written.
Mr. Hart.
I have a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to restrict reconsideration of P 2315 and P 2316.
Motion to restrict reconsideration on 2315 and 16, seconded by Ms. Knudsen. Any discussion? Thought he was heading to the mic. Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstained. Ayes have it. Moving on. Page 6. Deposit to Fire Department Apparatus Capital Reserve Fund, Article P 2317. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $70,000 to be deposited into the previously established Fire Department Apparatus Capital Reserve Fund? Majority vote required. Total appropriation $70,000. Withdraw from the general fund. Unassigned fund balance $70,000. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation, 0. The balance in the Fire Department Apparatus Capital Reserve Fund was $389,152 as of December 31st, 2022, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 600. Motion to place this on the ballot as written. Mr.
I'll make that
DeRoche.
motion.
Second, Mr. Coy. Mr. DeRoche, are you going to speak on this?
Yes, so this is part of our capital improvement plan to replace equipment. If you remember last year or previous years, it's been about $140,000 a year we were asking. With the recent purchase of the ladder truck, we were able to reduce that amount because the ladder truck was going to be very expensive. So we reduced it in half, and this will help us level taxes every year. So when it comes time to replace a piece of equipment, and fire apparatus is not cheap at all, we won't be putting it in the budget. We'll be able to use these capital reserves to replace equipment in a timely manner. So,
any discussion on this article? Yes, sir.
I'd like to, Jason Dumas, 6 Pine View. I'd like to make that amendment to bring it back up to the 140. Have it signed as well. So same verbiage to the 140.
I don't understand.
Motion is to amend the $70,000 to read the sum of $140,000 to be deposited into the previously established Fire Department Apparatus Capital Reserve Fund, withdraw from General Fund unassigned fund balance. I assume that's the same 100,000.
Correct.
140,000.
40,000 from the.
So the amount to be raised by new taxation, 0. Can you just take this back, Mr. Dumas, and just put 140,000 next to that? We have a record of it. We have a second on that. We have a second. Did you get his name and address? For the second, give your name and address for the clerk.
Derek Travis, 31 Sunrise Terrace, Plastow.
Mr. Dumas, you want to speak to your motion?
Sure. So just like the police fund, fire apparatus are expensive. Our last ladder truck was bought with bond. I'm not a big fan of that, especially how we have $2.5 million in the general fund. The 389, does that include the ambulance that we already purchased as well?
That takes into account that. So I believe that is net of the ambulance.
Okay. So the same ladder or the tower truck that we purchased last year is now running $1.9 million. So the increase of fire apparatus is increasing just like everything else. This fund has always been underfunded, which is why we brought out a bond last year for the fire apparatus. We do have additional trucks that have to be replaced, and we're not going to have the funds to replace them, which will then require us to go for a bond.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion to amend. Motion to amend up to 140,000. Mr. Pelletier.
Surprise, I'm going to say that I would not support this. What's very common is we're getting death by 1,000 cuts as the taxpayers. It's all these little things that are adding up. You're already putting 70,000 in there. There's no reason to add more. If we're building it year by year, like you're saying, when the time comes, the money will be there. There's no reason to increase it. Thank you.
Discussion on the motion to amend. Only on the amendment.
Mr. Moderator, just a point. In terms of funding, I mean, that CIP account that we're funding, I believe the CIP committee met and we came up with a number to fund what the projected cost of equipment replacement was going to be over a period of time. And the general account or the unassigned account is being referenced. I mean, again, the general account, and I think Mr. Colby can kind of speak to that, is also kind of being used as to pay current monies, such as when we pay the schools and things like that. So it isn't necessarily that you have, let's say, $2.5 million just laying there. I mean, there is surplus, and there is surplus generated every year that you can see when you look at the audited financials. But the CIP committee did look at what the requirements were in terms of funding these savings accounts to offset the impact when we purchase equipment. So in terms of saying that it's underfunded or not, I mean, I guess that's an opinion, but there is a schedule how to fund these accounts. It's not an arbitrary number.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion to amend?
Patrick Kiley, 110 Main Street. When the Capital Improvement Committee does the reference and does the creating of those capital reserve, do they account for the rate of inflation that's going on right now and current market prices for these, especially these fire apparatus, which have gone up dramatically in the past, even just year alone? Thank you.
I think when the CIP committee met, I mean, whether or not you're going to project what, I think it was a consideration in the sense that there is going to be some sort of notion of inflation. All right. So whether or not you build that into the calculation, it's sort of a guesstimate if you're looking at something that's 20 years out. But I guess my point is that it wasn't just a number that, you're throwing saying that let's do 70 this year, let's do 100 next year. It is the sense that this is what it's going to cost. How can we spread it out? So just to kind of disabuse people of thinking that it's just necessarily arbitrary.
Chair recognizes Mr. DeRoche.
So one of the things that we talked about in the CIP was inflation and what that means to the plan. So although inflation was extremely high, we calculated into this year's plan a 3% increase over the next 5 years. So we're going to take a look at, and I think inflation was 11%, 12%. It was much higher, but that was just for the planning of this year. So next year we'll look at inflation again and see, do we need to escalate that number higher to account for in the future? So it's all a moving target. It's hard to nail down those numbers. We can look at getting quotes, but as Mr. Dumas said, we bought the truck at I don't know, 1.4, and now it's already a 25% increase. So that it's always a moving target. So we try our best to put numbers out there that are going to level fund and work to this plan. The plan isn't just 5 years, it's actually 20 years down the road, but we always work 5 years at a time. So yes, I'll just leave it at that. So thank you.
I believe the fire chief would like to speak to this on the motion to amend, chief.
Well, actually, I was wanting to clarify the CIP and the current situation where we're at. So using their current plan previous to this year, I guess I should say, it was grossly underfunded. That's why we had to go after a bond. The projected cost to replace a ladder truck was not even close. Fire engines are now catching up to that. So in 2023, I'll be meeting with the CIP committee to better get a hold of where we're at. We're hoping that the inflation kind of levels out this year and we could get a better understanding of that. So the 70,000 from 140,000 was to take care of the debt service that the ladder truck bond payment created. But moving forward in the future, that number probably needs to be increased at some point, if it's not this year, in future years. But there is going to be some underfunding issues I'm going to project in 2023 inflation rate. So this is giving an example. That ladder truck that we ordered in May, $1.5 million. If you bought it today, it's $1.9 million. That's how much it increased in not even a year.
Sell it, we'll make money.
I know.
Mr. Moderator, could I ask the chief just a question?
Would you take a question?
Sure.
So are you saying then that, let's say in 2023, you'll meet with the CIP committee to give them updated data so that we can refine what the funding would be going forward? That
is correct. That was the plan, is to meet this year, because it's so volatile.
Yeah,
2022. I mean, every 2 months we were getting notifications it's going up 6%, 8%, 12%. So my hope is in 2023 that industry finally levels off, and we could get a better understanding of what a fire engine is going to cost in 2 years from now or 3 years from now.
So we don't necessarily, we'll have updated information to adjust that schedule next year. But so then it's not, to amend it on the fly right now without that data would be.
It's going to help get us back on track, correct? If we amend it, if it gets amended by the citizens, I as a department head, presented at 70,000. If we have some citizens that are wanting to increase it, I'm not against that because I know it's already behind.
Thank you.
On the motion to amend.
Can I just ask the chief a question when the next
Would you take another question, Chief? Chief, would you take another question?
When is the next
My
apparatus?
question is, would you take another question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
When is the next apparatus plan to be replaced? And would that 2023 decision put us even further behind schedule for the CIP meeting?
So currently we have an engine that's a 2003 model. It's projected to make it 25 years. I don't know if it will make it 25 years. So that would put the next one, if it could make it that long, at 2028. So not too many years to start collecting funds for an apparatus that's probably going to cost close to $1 million.
Thank you, Chief. On the motion to amend, to increase the amount to $140,000. Anybody new to speak on the motion to amend?
Sorry, you got me. I just want to say that I know we're doing these reserve funds to technically save the taxpayers from getting hit, but it just seems that this is not going to save us any money. We should be putting forward warrant articles that pay it in full, even if it raises the tax, so we don't have to adjust constantly. It's giving a false sense of security to the taxpayers. It's, we see inflation going up. This is not the way we should be handling this. If we need new equipment, we should put it in front of the taxpayers as a unit and have it done that way, so we're not constantly adjusting our numbers every single year. Thank you.
On the motion to amend. I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion to amend the amount from $70,000 to $140,000. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
I'm going to ask for cards. I can't tell. All in favor, please raise your cards. Norm, can you help count? How many did you get, Norm? Oh, you didn't hear me. Norm, let's both count. Okay. Keep them up. Keep them up. Don't put them down. Don't put them down. I have 24. Okay, you can put them down. Those against, raise your hand. Well, you made a lot of noise, those that were against. So you have a good vocal cords. So the ayes have it. So now on the article as amended, any further discussion on Article P2317 as amended? No discussion. So Article P2317 as amended will appear on the ballot. Moving on. Deposit to Cemetery Special Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund. Article P-2318. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,000 to be deposited into the previously established Cemetery Special Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund? The funds will be withdrawn from the general fund, unassigned fund balance, majority vote required. Total appropriation $20,000, withdrawal from the general fund, unassigned fund balance $20,000. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation, $0. Balance in the Cemetery Special Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund was $26,531 as of December 31, 2022. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 600. Motion to place it on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. DeRoche, second.
Second.
Mr. Coy. Mr. Coy, I have you to speak on this.
There's approximately $48,000 in the Cemetery Special Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund, all of which is expected to be used in the first phase of the expansion out at the cemetery. The warrant article to replenish the funds so the $20,000 will be available for the next phase. If you look out there, you can already see where there's been some tree cuts done out there. So there is an expansion planned for where the current cemetery is.
Any discussion on this article? Seeing none, Article P-2318 shall appear on the ballot as written. Next item, deposit to Old Home Day Expendable Trust Fund. Article P-2319. Shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,892 to be deposited into the previously established Old Home Day Expendable Trust Fund, the sum to come from the unassigned fund balance, and represents donations received in 2022. No amount to be raised from taxation. Majority vote required. Total appropriation $2,892. Withdraw from the general fund. Unassigned fund balance $2,892. No amount to be raised by 2023 taxation, $0. The general fund unassigned fund balance was $2,534,815 as of 12/31/22. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400 and the Budget Committee 501. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made, seconded.
Second.
By Mr. Coy. Mr. Britton, are you speaking on this?
Yes, the motion will effectively move the funds from the unassigned fund balance to the Old Home Day Expendable Trust Fund for the use of Old Home Day Committee in planning and running of the 2023 Old Home Day event.
Thank you, Mr. Britton. Any discussion? Seeing no one approaching the mic, P-2319 will appear on the ballot as written.
Bob. I'd like to make a motion to restrict reconsideration of, I believe it's P-2316,
17 through 19.
17 and 18.
And 19.
And 19.
18 through 19.
So I have a motion made, seconded by Ms. Knutson to restrict reconsideration, Articles P-23, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Any discussion? Yes. Oh, the clerk tells us we already restricted 16, so 17, 18, 19.
I'll amend my motion. to
Maker and the
17, 18,
second
19.
agree to amend, restrict 17, 18, and 19.
We done yet?
No one approaching. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstained. Ayes have it. Thank you. So that brings us to 20. Readopt standard and optional Veterans Tax Credit, RSA 72:28. Article P-23-20. Shall the town vote to readopt the standard and optional Veterans Tax Credit under RSA 72:28 to remain in place and include the expanded eligibility effective for the April 1, 2023 tax year? The need to readopt the tax credit is due to the passing of House Bill 1667, which expanded the eligibility requirements to include individuals who have not yet been discharged from service in the armed forces. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400. Again, motion to place this on the ballot as written.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Mr. Gifford, are you going to speak on that?
Pretty much speaks for itself. Governor Sununu passed the law that just allows our armed forces that are active duty members to be included on the tax credits.
Thank you. Any questions? No one approaching the mic? Article P-2320 will appear on the ballot as written. Moving on. Readopt all veterans property tax credit, RSA 72:28B. Article P-23-21. Shall the town vote to readopt the all veterans property tax credit under RSA 72:28B to remain in place and include the expanded eligibility effective for the April 1, 2023 tax year? The need to readopt the tax credit is due to the passing again of House Bill 1667, which expanded the eligibility requirements to include individuals who have not yet been discharged from service in the armed forces. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400. Again, motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Made
Second.
and seconded by our selectmen. Mr. Gifford, do you want to just say a few words?
Pretty straightforward. They're moving their tax discount up from $500 to $750. I think if you check throughout the state, we're one of the only towns that are left.
That's the next one.
We're on 21, I think.
21.
Just changed to the eligibility.
Oh, I apologize.
Same as
What's that?
pretty much the same as 20.
Yeah, okay.
So we won't need to call on you for 22.
All right.
So on 21.
So I'm lost.
Okay, 21, I believe Mr. Gifford was going to say it's the same as the one before. They've expanded the eligibility to include active servicemen. So any questions on that? Any discussion? Seeing nobody approaching the mic, P-2321 will appear on the ballot as written. Moving on. Modify the all veterans tax credit. This is Mr. Gifford. Article P-23-22, shall the town modify the veterans tax credit in accordance with RSA 72:28, common Roman 2, from its current tax credit of $500 per year to an amount not to exceed $750. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400. Motion to place this on the ballot as written.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. Now, Mr. Gifford, would you like to talk about this one?
Exactly what I said, Bragg.
So he says it's a good idea. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Article P-23-22 will appear on the ballot as written. Changing polling hours for state and federal elections. Article P-23-23. Shall the town vote to change the polling hours for state and federal elections from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.? Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 400. Again, motion to place this on the ballot as written.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. DeRoche.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Coy. Mr. DeRoche.
I'll just say that the article speaks for itself. We're just looking to change the time. We need a vote of the body to approve this. We've taken action to change the town voting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So we want to be consistent with all of our elections. And we had our moderators, recommend this change as well. So it's pretty straightforward. We're like to change the time and have the voters vote on that.
Discussion?
Ryan LeBrecq, 174 Main Street. I'll say the last couple of years I probably voted between 7 and 8 because I worked from 6 to 7. So I think it would, by reducing the hours, I think it would inconvenience some folks. That's all.
I believe my assistant, Norman Major, will speak for him and I on this. Mr. Major.
Most all the other communities vote over a 12-hour period from 7 to 7. And this would bring us in alignment with what the other communities are doing. I record at all the elections how many people vote during each hour. And there's hardly any that vote that last hour. And I've got the records to show that. And I hope you'll support this.
We had someone here.
Mr. Major answered my question.
Mr. Pelletier.
I just want to speak in favor of this because I'm really never in favor of any warrant articles, and this is actually one.
Thank you, Mr. Pelletier. Mr. Major and I appreciate that. As just another comment on top of Mr. Major, the state and the federal government require us to do more accounting and more paperwork at the end of the day. So that doesn't mean your election workers are leaving earlier. We're staying later, as those of you that work the elections with us know. So it's really to help get efficient action done and to keep it to a 12-hour day. We do appreciate that some people, like the gentleman, maybe have to move a different time to vote. But we thank you for your support on this.
Open at 5?
If you are in Dixville Notch, you can vote at midnight, but not here in Plaistow. Okay, good. Thank you. Any more discussion on P2323? Seeing none, Article P2323 will appear on the ballot as written. Citizens petition. Article CP 2302. Shall the town vote to designate the final end uses of the Beatty Waste Oil site, Beatty site, as conservation and passive recreation, which is allowed by current zoning and is consistent with the town's master plan. We are aware that the Beatty Site Group has proposed to fund the future use of the Beatty site as a conservation and passive recreation destination, with additional amenities such as ADA accessible network of walking trails and enhancements to wildlife corridors if the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, were to modify its cleanup requirements to align with these designated end uses while remaining protective of human health and the environment. EPA is to be notified of the town of Plaistow's updated and use designation and the preference for this outcome. Majority vote required. This was not recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Is the petitioner here?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I move to amend the petition.
Let me allow to have the petition just put on the floor, and then I'll take the amendment.
Very good.
And I don't, no one told me who the petitioner is. Is the petitioner here?
Point of order, can only the petitioner amend?
No, you can move to put it on the warrant. So are you making that motion?
No.
No?
We got to put it on the warrant.
It's got to go on the warrant anyways,
the
so
motion.
we have a motion to place it on the warrant. And Mr. Coy, can we get a second from you?
Second.
We have a second. Now I'll take an amendment.
Richard Anthony. The amendment is as reads, shall the town vote to designate the final end uses of the bead waste oil site, bead site, as conservation and passive recreation upon completion of cleanup per the record of decision dated 1/9/2004, and after the town of Plaistow has taken ownership of the 41-acre bead site, which is allowed by current zoning and is consistent with the town's master plan. We are aware that the bead site group has proposed to fund the future use of the bead site as a conservation and passive recreation destination with additional amenities such as ADA accessible network of walking trails and enhancements to wildlife corridors in keeping with all U.S. environmental protection agencies regulations and standards to protect human health and the environment. EPA is to be notified by the town of Plaistow's updated end-use designation upon the outcome of this vote. Majority vote required.
Yes, he has it written. Signed it too. Follows the rules, Mr. Anthony. It's written and it's signed. That's a motion to amend. It keeps conservation and passive recreation, and I believe the addition is upon completion of cleanup per the record of decision ROD dated 1/9/04, and after the town of Plaistow has taken ownership of the 41-acre BD site. And my memory isn't great, but I think, is that basically your major change to it? Was there something else?
Yes. It's as
So
long
I have
as
a
it's-
motion to amend by adding those two paragraphs or the two statements
Yes,
in
it's the gist is to comport with the
ROD and we take ownership.
yes.
Okay, so do we have a second on his motion to amend? We have a second by Mr. Heffernan. We have discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, I mean, it's the amendment. I guess I'm not familiar with the whole, I understand where the I understand of the bead waste oil site. I'm wondering why the Board of Selectmen didn't support it, so I'd like to know that. And what are the alternatives if this doesn't happen, I guess? Sounds like it's being funded by somebody else anyway. So I'm just not understanding the whole premise behind all of it, I guess.
I'll recognize Mr. Britton. Maybe he can answer the question about the board.
One of the reasons, probably one of the bigger reasons that the Board of Selectmen didn't support it was we felt as though it was premature. We don't know to what extent it's going to be cleaned yet. We hope it's going to be cleaned the way it was laid out. We have no idea how long it's going to take. If it's going to take 5 more years, it's going to take 20 or 30 years from now that it'll be certified as clean. And we felt as though it was just premature to be placing anything on there or addressing anything to be on there until we knew how it was going to come out and when it was going to come out.
On the motion to amend, we have a new person to speak.
The town's
Name and address.
Tim Moore, 33 Sweet Hill Road. Way back when we started this remediation, the town had a local group that presented and was accepted by the town for future use. I think in general, everyone thought that was a good idea, which is part of it was for passive rec, just as the citizens petition. My concern is, though, I think the big concern back then is once the town assumed, if the town did assume ownership, what's the liability? And I think since then there's been federal legislation that would help in that regard. My concern, though, is it's a citizen's petition, and I didn't think it was just open for amendment unless the citizens that filed the petition were here and agreed to the amendment. So I don't think we can legally amend this.
I can answer the second part of that. Citizens' petitions are amendable as long as their subject matter is not eliminated. And I see that by this motion, his subject matter, basically to designate the final end use as conservation and passive, hasn't been eliminated. Conditions were added to it that the ROD be accepted and the town of Plaistow take ownership, but the subject matter has not changed. So it is amendable.
I think I disagree with you a little bit because they don't say anything about the ROD. They may be assuming that if this amendment passes, then we've already described the use, and that use would not entail the detailed remediation that was originally described in the ROD. So I don't, while it's true there's passive recreation, I think adding the ROD language makes a big change in the petition.
Thank you for your opinion, but I think you're wrong. Thank you. Next speaker.
Carrie Lauer. I live on 6 Woodland Drive. I've been a resident of the town for 14 years and actually work on the BD site as one of the engineers that's responsible for helping to facilitate the cleanup. Been there about 15 years since the project's been going on, and I just wanted to provide a couple of clarifications. The first clarification is that if the language regarding the rod were to be added, then that would require that the soil be removed down to about 10 feet. The cost of doing this is extremely high, and there would not be the funds left over to be able to provide the amenities on that site. It would still remain as conservation land. It would not become residential, but it would be fenced off and the public would not have any access to it. The requested change to the EPA to modify the cleanup standard, which is the value that we need to meet, still requires excavation, still going to require off-site removal of soil, and it's going to save about 3,000 trucks leaving that site over the course of that remedy, which, fun fact, it's 8 times around the world driving those miles. So we're still going to be safe. We're still going to be protective of the human health requirements and the wildlife. But I would argue that it's actually much more beneficial to leave the material where it is, put certain safeguards in place, and allow the public to not only have access to it, but also the wildlife that use that area as a corridor.
Would you take a question from me?
Sure.
Maybe you can explain because I don't know. Can you tell us what the record of decision is that was issued in 2004 that Mr. Anthony put into his motion?
The record of decision is the document provided by the EPA that stipulates what those cleanup standards should be. It did not take into account the current technologies that we have today, and so we are requesting that that be considered.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, could I ask a question, or?
Would you take a question from Mr. Anthony?
Sure.
Just a question. I believe in 2 Board of Selectmen meetings ago, it was requested whether or not members of the Board of Selectmen could physically tour some of the remediation activities at the beach site. What are the requirements for them to do that tour? And did you do the tour? And for what reasons why you didn't do the tour?
I believe that the tour was not conducted at that time because there was active remediation activities occurring, and we want to be protective of everyone's safety.
Protective in what sense?
To keep you from getting injured.
What's that?
There were a number of pieces of machinery there. We had ongoing.
Is the contamination a consideration also in terms of the protection of the people?
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. So, and the ROD requesting 10 feet of removal. Is there 10 feet of contaminant? Are there contaminants located around the 10 feet area?
In certain areas, yes.
All right. So and this is a Superfund site, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's toxic material that it was unsafe for the Board of Selectmen to tour when they went on site because of the toxic nature of the material that you were removing.
We've had a number of open houses over the last couple of years where the public has been invited, including my own family and children. The rationale for not allowing or not asking the Board of Selectmen to be able to conduct that walk was because the area of the site where they would be walking was actively being remediated. The material that is located at 10 feet has been remediated in other ways. We've done lots of thermal groundwater.
And those water technologies or remediations are going to be ongoing for an indeterminate amount of time, correct? I mean,
They'll be ongoing until we meet the requirements of our cleanup.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hefner?
I may have misunderstood what she had to say, but there is a record of decision. I believe what I was hearing is that what was determined in that record of decision, the amount of money the town would get, would change. Can that change with a record of decision? And did I hear that correctly?
I don't know if anybody can answer that question. I
don't.
The town doesn't receive any money.
So I guess my question is, as part of the record of decision, it's to dig down the 10 feet. And also the town will be getting some funds in order to do what they need to do with that land. No?
We don't even own the land.
Okay.
We own a portion of the land, but the majority of the property is owned by the Beatty Group.
Okay. So as far as the record of decision, it's 10,000 feet down that wants to be changed at this point.
I'd love it to go 10,000
10,000.
feet.
Not 10,000, sorry. Yeah. Maybe we can get that changed. Yeah. But that's basically what they're looking to change at this point.
Yep.
And reasonings behind that, as far as the Board of Selectmen are hearing?
Mr. DeRoche?
With this site, there are some very hazardous chemicals that were dumped into the ground over there, and I will applaud the Beatty Group with all of the work that they've done. They brought in new technology. They're cleaning the ground. They put in the conservation area, and I do like the idea and the proposal for the trails. However, I don't feel that it's worth saving trucks and putting in trails, and I'll use a phrase that was used last year, polish a turd kind of thing. I don't want to cut corners at the health and safety of the residents of this town. And I want to stick with the record of decision where they're going to clean down what they're required to clean down for residential. Now, the biggest concern that I feel that people are concerned about is the residential portion of it. When I think of this residential piece of it, it's not just the site itself, but it's the surrounding residents in town. Within that site, you have people's backyards that go right up to that fence. There's other issues over there. We're going to have a meeting on Monday with the EPA, and they're going to give us an update. And I know they're meeting with the Beatty Group at some point, I think later that week. But there are other issues of concern that came up during their second 5-year review document, which is available on our town webpage. So although I like the idea of the trails, I still want to clean it to the highest standard. Now, if the EPA even agreed, and say the town agreed to doing this, the EPA may not even take it under consideration because the Beatty Group still has to submit. They don't even need our approval. I think they're trying to set a precedence to force the EPA to change the remedy. Now, they don't need our approval. They can put together their study and their plan, and they can submit it to the EPA. They have not submitted this plan and all the proper paperwork for this plan to the EPA. EPA isn't even considered this plan whatsoever. To my knowledge. So that being said, I'm not in favor of cutting corners at the health and safety of our residents. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. I was going to ask if the EPA has made a decision towards this, and obviously you answered that, so, okay, thank you.
On the motion to amend. Go ahead. On the motion to amend.
Hello, Pamela Gani, 14 Country Club Lane. Do we have a itemized list of what these contaminants are, what tests have been performed?
Yes.
Where is that located?
It's all on our webpage. We have a BD site page. There is the BD site group has their own page. The EPA has a BD page itself. It has a record of decision, the remedy reuse plan that was decided that Mr. Moore referred to back in 03. It has all the documentation, all the 5-year, all the reviews that were done, what the levels of the contaminants are within the ground and in the water. So it's all available for the general public to view.
And what specifically are your concerns personally?
That there are still hazardous chemicals in the ground.
I mean, like specifically, like is there a specific chemical?
VOCs.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
VOC.
Yep.
I think it's PP2, and maybe someone from the BD can correct me if I'm wrong, but those are just a couple of the chemicals. There's also PFAS over there. There's also other issues over there. There's a myriad of different chemicals, heavy metals that were cleaned up out of there. Yes, they've cleaned the site out. They've taken out 140 million gallons of contaminated, well, 140 million gallons that's not the number. It's 140,000 of contaminated liquid from those grounds. We had barrels buried in the ground that were leaching into the ground. So there's all kinds of hazardous chemicals that were there. Now, they're doing a great job on cleaning most of those up, but there's still other issues.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Moderator.
Have
Okay.
Kathy was at, no, you're all set. Kathy was at the mic.
Kathy Slade, 124 Willard Way. I have a question on the amendment. I think it said something about the town taking ownership of the property, and I didn't know if that was a definitive plan. So if that's not, then I don't think that should be a stipulation in the warrant article. But can anybody clarify that for me?
He does add it along with the ROD that it's a condition of designating that the town has to take ownership. So does anyone want to comment on the town taking ownership, let's say after the completion of the ROD?
There is language in there about the town taking ownership of.
In what? In the
of
ROD?
The ROD. Of taking ownership, but we don't own the property.
Right.
So whether we take ownership, we may have to purchase it from that group because they own it. They're not. I don't know if they're going to just hand it to us willy-nilly. You know, my concern about taking ownership of that is that it's not going to be 100% clean. 40 years down the road, something might pop up in someone's wells. Who knows? But what makes me nervous about taking ownership of it is, and I believe Mr. Moore had mentioned, there's safeguards in place from the federal government that we're not going to be on the hook or liability for any things that pop up. Now, the ongoing issue there is the groundwater cleanup. That's going to be something that's going to be there for a period of time until certain levels are met. And I can't give you an idea on how long that's going to take, but that system is going to be on property for a number of years. 40, 50, 25, I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Anthony, do you have something?
Just to clarify and also to amplify what Mr. DeRoche is saying, I had spoken to DES because I objected to what the notion of who was being considered an abutter in terms of notifications and things like that. All right, so you have a sense that the people that are considered abutters around the bead site are sort of in geographical, physical proximity to the site. And also that notion of abutter gets expanded out as you find, let's say, contaminants in wells I believe the wells get taken over and they're used as monitoring wells and as such to kind of monitor the plume of pollutions that might be going out. But the notion of a butter is more expansive. All right. So if, let's say, Kelly Brook, which is coming off of the Bede site, is flowing through, aquifers, let's say on the other side of 125, like Village Way area that has a community well, the Tuxbury community has a community well, Stonebridge has a Stonebridge has a community well, and they're pulling water out of the ground that's in proximity to Kelly Brook. So as such, those communities should be considered abutters. I had at least asked DES, and on behalf of, let's say, people at Tuxbury Association, Stonebridge, and Village Way, that we be considered as abutters in terms of notifications, meetings, and things like that. Because if something comes up in a well in terms of contaminants, you were going to hear all sorts of assurances that the type of contaminants that are coming out of the Bede site aren't necessarily transmissible by water and such physically until they're discovered, until something's discovered. And that's my point. So it's more of a concern that, whatever we're going to do to remediate that site should be done to the highest standards, and it shouldn't be a marketing or narrative changing technique to present to the EPA that somehow Plaistow is on board with a less stringent cleanup of a Superfund site in the middle of our town.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to make a few points of clarification. I spoke with a couple of the people that I work with, and they reminded me that the reason that the Board of Selectmen didn't actually go to the site during those two instances that you asked about was because they canceled. So I was mistaken. My apologies.
That's not true. The EPA,
That's not true.
The EPA wouldn't allow that meeting to happen.
Okay.
I have
wasn't
confirmation
there,
from
so
the EPA on a phone call. They said, we're not allowing you on to walk
Mr.
through.
DeRoche, can we let her speak and then I'll recognize you?
Sorry.
It's all right. I did also want to just clarify that if the site is cleaned up to the ROD requirement as it is written currently, the public amenities that are planned for there, the ADA accessible trails, all of that type of thing, it will not be funded. We will not be able to do that. So it will
Who cares?
be left as is. And then the third thing that I just wanted to clarify was that the reason that a proposal has not gone to EPA yet is because we were hoping for town support first.
Thank you. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, just to reiterate, the EPA wouldn't allow that site walk to happen. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Kathy Slade, 124 Willard Way. I think there was somebody from the BD site, the BD group, that wanted to address some of the concerns. I don't know if that was allowable for them to.
They're not on our list of non-residents. If they're a resident, like this lady that spoke, she can speak. And if
They weren't in the original list when we.
I don't think
announced
they were.
it?
I don't recall some BD
Okay.
rep being on there.
Okay, thank you.
Can you make an amendment to that?
If you get their name, you can make a motion. Do you know their name? Somebody here from BD? Your name, sir?
Can I make a
Mr.
motion for
Edwards.
Sean Edwards from the BD group? John Edwards from the BD group to
Be able to
address some
speak.
concerns.
Do we have a second on the motion? We have a second by Mr. Pelletier. All in favor of letting Mr. Edwards speak, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Hey.
Abstained. The ayes have it.
As a resident, can I speak first?
Ryan LeBrecq, 174 Main Street. I now understand why I was confused by reading this. This seems like a political football that the town shouldn't be involved in at all. It seems like it's between the BD group and the EPA, and we should stay out of it.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that?
I'd like Mr. Edwards to speak if he wishes. He's not told me he really wants to speak.
I just want to address his comment.
I'll have
It'll be-
Mr. DeRoche address his comment,
It'll
and
be
if you want to
brief.
come up to the mic, Mr. Edwards, go ahead.
To reiterate Mr. LeBrec's statement, we're in the middle of this. We want this cleaned to the highest standard, but it's a give and take between the group, the BD group, and the EPA. We're just trying to navigate this as best we can. So if we need to go to counseling after, then we'll have to do that.
Let me speak. Oh, I'm sorry.
Spell your name.
My name is John Edwards, John.
In your address.
And I'm group counsel for the BD Site Group
Your office is
in Nashua, New Hampshire.
for, you said BD Site Group?
The BD Site Group, correct.
Thank you.
And let me just say at the outset, because I think it's a very good question, why would the town be involved in this process at all? In the final analysis, the remedy, what needs to be done to clean the BD site, is something that ultimately is determined by the US EPA in a collaborative process with the BD site group. And the short answer is the US EPA will make no changes to the remedy if the town itself is not in support of the proposal. And the BD site group, in looking at the site and its work on the site over the last 2 decades, came to the conclusion within the last 7 or 8 years that it was becoming more and more evident, at least in our dealings with our neighbors, that there was a real interest in seeing the property preserved ultimately as open space, a conservation area, and an area for passive recreational use. When we began to understand that, one of the critical baseline assumptions in the ROD that we've been talking about, or has been talked about today, is that the final end use for this site will be residential, that construction will take place, and that it would not be an open space. That baseline assumption dictates what needs to be done to assure that the site ultimately is safe for humans to be around it and for the environment generally. Residential construction is very intrusive. It requires a lot of excavation work to a very deep level, and it leads to a remedy outcome as a result of it. And the remedy outcome for contaminated soil removal is 10 feet. That doesn't, even if that's the remedy and that's what's done, there will be contaminated soil left on this site forever, because the decision is being made that no one will ever be exposed to it. That's why. Now, if the end use isn't residential construction, if the end use is, as described in this Warren article, there is no need to do that kind of intrusive excavation, because no one will ever be exposed to anything in the soil that deep. It simply, the calculation is made that there is no risk of that. And that's really what is driving this. Our thinking was, if we don't have to remove as much soil, we save money and we can turn the money back over to the community to deliver an open space that is accessible to all and of use to the community as a whole. That's the thinking. That's the bottom line thinking. In the final analysis, whatever happens, the US EPA and the BD site group will not allow the residents of the town to be exposed to hazards. Human health would be protected, whether it's a 2-foot soil removal, whether it's a 10-foot soil removal. That is a bedrock certainty. The agency wouldn't allow a remedy that wasn't protective of human health and the environment. But if the end use were not as intrusive as residential construction, a different remedy would be protective of human health and the environment. That's the thinking. It's really that simple. And it was our hope, it is our hope, that we can trade those savings and deliver an amenity to the community. All the costs of that open space the group would bear, and all the costs of maintaining and administering that open space on behalf of the community would continue to be borne by the site group. If we can't obtain those savings, the group can't deliver those benefits to the community because the money won't be there. And then in the final analysis, the decision will have to be made, what will the site group do with the site? And the most efficient thing, in all likelihood, might well be to simply fence off the site and deny it as any access to it, because it'll be easier to operate and maintain all the elements of the remedy, like the groundwater monitoring wells and the groundwater, all the groundwater work that will continue. It'll be easier to operate the site without any access to it. These are the options that are before us. This is what we were trying to present to the community. And while I know when looking at a Superfund site, the thinking is, oh my goodness, this is a 10, this is a 15, this is a 20, this is a 30-year timeline. The truth is, assuming a remedy change can be effected, this is about, in our opinion, about a 5 to 8 year timeline to turn this into a community resource. If it doesn't happen, it is going to be a timeline along the lines that has been mooted, I think, in conversations with the board and generally. So that's the situation. The BD Site Group, through an LLC, does hold title to the property. And in the final analysis, what happens with the BD, with the site itself and its who owns it is going to have to be a function of a conversation between the town and the BD Site Group. And it'll have to decide whether and how it wants to convey the property. But if it does, it becomes an issue of concern for the taxpayers, because under those circumstances, the taxpayers would be footing the bill associated with maintaining the open space. So those are the choices, those are the trade-offs. We were hopeful that we could do this, and we think it would be good for the community. And we emphatically believe that whether the remedy is modified to change those cleanup standards, or whether that the human health of the community, the environment, will be protected. That is simply not an item that is up for negotiation here. And nobody, certainly the group, doesn't believe for a moment that either remedy poses a threat. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Do you have a question?
I have a question. You talk about the savings.
Mm-hmm.
By making that change, how many millions of dollars would the BD Site Group save?
We don't know precisely, but it is an order of magnitude of at least 7 figures, a few $1 million for sure.
You don't have, so if you don't know that calculation,
No,
how can you propose it?
We do. Well, I just told you, we know at least
a few, at least 7 figures, a few. That is a very broad number.
At least, let's say at least $2 to $3 million. And if that's the savings, we would turn it toward building the amenities and creating a trust that would allow the property to be continued to be maintained essentially in perpetuity.
Would the BD Group be willing to turn over 100% of the savings to the town?
Sitting here, I don't know the answer to that question. But what we're talking about is creating a trust that administers, that deals with all the amenities that would have to be built to make it meet the kind of plans and specifications we're describing, and then to assure that there was a source of money in perpetuity to run the property, to make sure that it is safe, that any improvements that need to be made in the future can be made. That is the group's intention, to place the property into a conservation easement, if we can succeed here, and make sure that there is enough money forever so that it's a resource for the community without it being a burden to the community financially.
And just to follow up, and if the town doesn't agree to this, then the BD Site Group is saying you're going to put up a fence and not allow anybody, so you're going to take your ball and go home.
That's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying at all.
That's what it sounds like.
What I'm saying is that we then have to make decisions about how to most efficiently manage a far more intrusive and expensive remedy. That may include simply maintaining the property in its current state, which is fenced off. It would be the most efficient, it may well be the most efficient way to manage the remedy over a 2 or 3 decade period thereafter. It's just the practical realities. We're going to spend a lot more time there than might otherwise have been the case.
Thank you.
Mr. Britton?
I'm a little skeptical, okay, to put it mildly. If you're talking potentially 2 or 3 decades, okay, you're talking $2 or $3 million, okay. That operation has got to be worth more than $1 million a year.
When the remedial work is completed, it won't be that much annually. No, it won't.
I'm talking about getting to that. If you fence it off and you keep the remedial work going, in other words, I feel as though, and rightfully so, you're representing your client.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to save as much money as you can. Give us what you feel as though is appropriate. But I don't feel as though we're getting the appropriate number, okay? I mean, if you came in here and probably said, hey, listen, we're probably going to be able to flip you $10 or $20 million, then you probably have the ear of a lot of people here. But when you start out saying, well, it's $1 million, and then it escalated in a matter of seconds up to $3 million, then there's something not right.
Well, it's very difficult. I would say it's impossible to tell you precisely what the savings would be if the soil remedy were modified. We do believe it could be somewhere in that range of $1 to $3 million. It could be. But it's very difficult to say whether it's going to be 1.2 or 2.8. It is extremely difficult. And you need no further proof of that than to look at the estimates of the cost of the remedy that are in the ROD today, and we're in the ROD in 2004, and where they are today. The costs of this site have mushroomed considerably since that original number was mooted. Essentially doubled, quite honestly.
Well, I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I'm going to say that I'm sticking with my no vote on this one.
Understood. Our hope, however, is that the warrant article, as originally drafted and submitted, goes to the town as a whole. Quite honestly, the amendment proposals that are made here effectively gut at least my understanding of the warrant article, because a critical component of it is that the town be supportive of an effort that we would undertake to obtain from the US EPA a modification of the remedy. The town plays a role in this. The US EPA will always seek the town's input in anything that happens at this site, whether it's a remedy change or anything else. The US EPA wants to know what the town's views are on these issues, and that will always be true.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I think we have somebody behind you.
So
Take one more question. I'd like to move we're still talking about the amendment, so I'd like to get the amendment to be moved.
I'd like to ask him a question.
Yeah, go ahead. He'll take one more question.
What's the name of the group or LLC?
The BD site group.
Is it a nonprofit or is it a for-profit business?
It's not a for-profit business. No, it is not. It's an entity created simply to manage the remedy and the property.
So you don't make any money off of the BD property?
Oh, no, it costs money, a lot of money.
We'll take one more. Do you have a question for him or do you have a comment?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Ryan Lebrecq, 174 Main Street. So I think it lays bare in full view here that this is a bunch of ridiculousness. The BD group clearly got somebody in the town to propose this. If they're offering $1, $2, $3 million, this is probably a $30, $50, $75 million problem. And he can talk in all the circles he wants, but I hope everybody sees through it and understands that the town should stay out of it. It's between BD and EPA. They should clean up the site, do what they need to do to get it done. If it takes 20 years or 50 years, whatever. At the end of the day, once it's clean, figure out what to do with it then, and only then. Unfortunately, putting this in front of citizens, most that aren't here are not even going to understand what it means. They're going to see, let's make some land into a recreation site, which BD has done a fantastic job at weaseling into the town warrants to get it to this point, which is very much a
We're talking
purposeful
about the amendment.
decision. So I understand. It's all lumped together, though. So anyway, I hope that everybody just makes this go away. Thanks.
I'll take two more comments because we're still talking about the amendment, which added those phrases. So I'll go with this lady and then with Mr. DeRoche.
Julie Lebrecht, 174 Main Street. I agree with the amendment. Let's set the rules. Let's make this the highest strict, clean it up right. Then if the town decides we want it, if we want to put trails in it, we'll make that decision then and pay for it ourselves if we have to. But I want it clean, and I want us to make the decision as a town to have it. So I feel like adding those restrictions into the amendment will make it clear. And if people do vote unknowingly when they have the chance to vote, then it will be voted appropriately.
Thank you. Last comment on the amendment.
On the citizens petition and the proposed amendment, we had our legal counsel take a look at it, and we were advised that it could be taken as non-binding. So whether it is a full yes or a full no, and it potentially could be challenged, but it is not binding the Board of Selectmen to the outcome of that vote. I do have a draft motion to change the language in the petition. I don't think it, but we'll just deal with one amendment at a time.
Can I speak to the amendment?
I had said last comment because we're doing the amendment. I'd appreciate if we can. He's going to have another motion, I hear. So get your lunch. So the amendment, which was seconded, is to add the phrase, upon completion of cleanup per the record of decision ROD, dated 1/9/2004, and after the town of Plaistow has taken ownership of the 41-acre BD site. All those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Abstained? I'm going to rule that the nays have it, so the motion fails to amend. Did you have another motion, Mr. DeRoche?
Yeah. The motion I have is, shall the town vote to authorize the select board to consider altering the designated final end uses of the BD waste oil site, BD site, and if the select board in its discretion determines that such an alteration is in the best interest of the town of Plaistow, to allow the select board to change that designated final end use.
I second it.
I have a first and I have a second by Ms. Let me see that.
Who's the second?
Katie. Shall the town vote to authorize the select board to consider altering the designated end uses of the BD waste oil site, BD site, and if the select board in its discretion determines that such an alteration is in the best interest of the town of Plaistow, to allow the select board to change that designated final end use. That's his amendment to replace the citizens petition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to give you back your motion and ask you to consider It's a citizen's petition. The subject matter can't be changed. I read that his subject matter is that we should designate the end use conservation and passive recreation. I don't see any conservation and passive recreation mentioned in your motion. And I don't know why the council cut it out, because it's just to authorize you. I don't want to rule it out of order since you had a council look at it, but I think it'd be more appropriate if it said to consider altering the designated final end uses to conservation and passive recreation. And I leave it up to you. Just to put his subject matter in there. Still leaves it as basically to see what your position is, but it questions should it be listed as conservation and passive recreation.
Yeah, the select board in its discretion.
They didn't write that.
And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to take a second and talk with my assistant.
It's freezing. Change the designated final end use.
Can't you turn the heater?
I don't think it can put the heat up to 90 and it's not going to bring enough any more than it is.
Serious?
Yeah.
You're cold now. I think he's thinking of
Right, they want that. That way they don't have to go down 10 feet.
Right, no, but into.
I understand because I just didn't understand what was going on.
Right, that's what he just said. And then we just vote no.
I just want to let you know that we
Yeah,
talked
I
about
figured that. Thank you.
I added to the end designated final end use to conservation.
Upon reflection, the maker of the motion amended his motion. I don't want to gavel the baby, but I'm baby friendly. Okay. So, you can have a little quiet for the people in the audience and watching on TV and the cable. Upon reflection, the maker of the motion amended his motion by adding at the end to conservation and passive recreation. So I'll read it again. Hopefully the second will agree. It maintains the subject matter of the original motion from the citizens petition and basically changes it, the paragraph, but it keeps the subject matter. So here's what the amended motion now reads. Shall the town vote to authorize the select board to consider altering the designated final end uses of the BD waste oil site, BD site, and if the select board in its discretion determines that such an alteration is in the best interest of the town of Plaistow, to allow the select board to change that final designated final end use to conservation and passive recreation. Signed by Mr. DeRoche. The second agrees to the amendment. So now a discussion on the amendment to see if the board shall authorize, the town shall authorize. Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, I think this actually does change the intent of the citizens petition. And even if I agree with the intent of Mr. DeRoche, I think it's out of order. I see this happen too many times with citizen petitions that people put stuff forward, then all the teeth gets taken out of it. So I find that citizen petitions are almost useless. I've seen this happen multiple times where basically they come up, we almost don't do it with anything else. Citizen petitions come up, and then at the end they stick as advisory or to the board. You're really just taking away the power from the actual people in the town. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just trying to really understand where this is going, because the way that it's worded, it sounds like the selectmen want to take away the end result from the community to make the final call? Or am I not hearing it correctly? And is it only to make the decision on whether it's used for conservation and trails? I'd like to get some clarity on that.
Mr. DeRoche,
So
your motion.
there's still conversations that need to be had. We still need to work with the BD group and the EPA to discuss.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
No,
I'm
I know.
asking one specific question. Is this trying to take away the end decision from the citizens and give it to the board? I'm asking him.
It's not to take it away from the citizens. There's
Would you
still
have the end result decision-making authority?
we would still have the end result decision-making authority, whether we tell the EPA that we agree with that or not.
Okay.
Any discussion on the amendment, the latest amendment? And remember, we're here, if you don't agree with the amendment and think it changes the original petition, you vote no on the amendment. If you agree with the amendment and thought it's proper, you vote yes.
So you don't think that it changes the intent by removing the power from the people and giving it to the board, Mr. Moderator?
The law, in my understanding, says you can change the intent of a citizen's petition. You can't change the subject matter. You can change the intent legally. The subject matter, you can't eliminate it. The subject matter, as I read it, and my assistant moderator agrees, has to do with the designation of this site as a conservation and passive recreation. This amendment includes that designation. So the subject matter, in my opinion, and the assistant moderator, is still in the amendment. But you have your right to vote. If you don't like it, you vote against it.
Well, can I appeal the ruling of the chair?
Can I say something?
I'll take Mr. DeRoche first.
So my concern with this citizens petition in general is that, and I've signed citizens petitions before, someone walks up to you and says, are you in favor of keeping something conservation? Some of the people may not know what exactly they're signing for, right? There are significant amount of documents that when I became a selectman that I had to read through and understand, and there is a lot of information there about what's entailed with cleaning up the site and what is in the best interest of the residents of this town to keep it safe and healthy and clean. I'll withdraw my motion if you guys want to leave it up to the citizens to do that,
Yes, please.
because then I encourage everyone to go to our web pages and start reading all these documents. This is your town. This is your water. This is your soil. I hope you understand the impacts of changing the use of this site.
Mr. Moderator.
I heard the maker of the motion say he would withdraw it. Is that, you wish to do that?
Are you?
Yeah, I wish you wouldn't withdraw the motion.
Is he?
Yeah.
Then someone else can make the motion.
Are you withdrawing your motion?
I'll make his motion after he drops it.
Yeah.
I'll second his motion.
So we need to sign this, and I had a request to overrule the ruling that it's an appropriate motion, even though it was created by council. So Mr. Peltier moved to object to allowing this motion as an inappropriate motion and his objection states he believes this changes the subject matter, eliminates the subject matter. Do I have a second on, can I have a second on Mr. Pelletier's motion to object to allowing this motion, the amendment? Do I hear a second?
Was there a second on? I second. Okay.
I'll say it again. He moved to overrule my motion, my decision to allow this motion because it still has the subject matter in it. He objected to that. Do I have a second to his objection? Mr. Pelletier. Raise your hand, Mr. Pelletier. We have a second. Again, for the record, your name again. Okay. She's seconding his motion to overrule the moderator. So any more discussion on objecting to our decision to allow this motion? Again, the motion does include designated final end use to conservation and passive recreation. I ruled that that's an appropriate amendment because it keeps the subject matter. Maybe not the intent, but the subject matter. So I'll take that for a vote. All in favor of overruling me so that we can't do this motion, signify by saying aye. All against this motion so we can, his motion to overrule me so that we can hear this motion and discuss it, signify by saying nay. Nay. I think the nays have it. I won't ask for abstentions. So his motion to overrule me fails. So now we're back to the amendment. The amendment by Mr. DeRoche. Shall the town vote to authorize the select board to consider altering the designated final end uses of the BD waste oil site? And if the select board in its discretion determines that such an alteration is in the best interest of the town of Plaistow, to allow the select board to change that designated final end use to conservation and passive recreation.
But for the record, this is now Mr. Dumas' motion, not Mr. DeRoche.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Mr. Dumas, thank you.
Seconded.
On the motion.
Is there a way to amend the amendment and have it worded?
You have to vote on the amendment and then enter another amendment.
Oh, for the love of God. Okay.
I thought you couldn't do amendments on the amendments.
Any more discussion on Mr. Dumas's motion, which was originally Mr. DeRoche?
I would just, Ms. Moderator, just to reinforce the fact that, again, this is a Superfund site. It is horrifically contaminated.
We just make that vote. I mean, this has been discussed for almost an hour now.
Point of order, interrupting me.
If you can finish your comment, because
Sure.
it's a new motion. So we haven't been on this motion for an hour, so I'll let him
Yes.
finish his comment.
So I think it's wholly appropriate to leave the decision in the hands of the Board of Selectmen that have access to all the information, the historical memory of it, and are the people that are going to be representing the town with respect to the EPA, the BEAD group, and such.
So that was the last comment on this amendment, on the amendment.
Shocker, I'm speaking against it. Even though I agree with the intent, like I said before, I've seen this happen 1,000 times. And to speak to your point, Mr. DeRoche, I agree that people need to be educated on this thing, but you can make that argument for every single article, almost on every single thing. If you want to limit voter, having people vote on it because they're not educated, then we should just have people not vote. Because there's a lot of people out there that are just casting their vote no matter what, that aren't educated on the topic. Thank you.
So I'm going to take a vote now. If you're in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
If you're opposed, nay. Nay. Abstained. The ayes have it. So now on the motion as amended, any discussion on the motion, the article as amended, the article as amended?
So what I'd like to propose is it reworded, stating that, yes, the board can continue keeping it in discussion, but that it goes to vote with the citizens of Plaistow having the final say, yay or nay, on what happens. Because the way it's worded right now, it sounds like it truly, this is just, and this is my first meeting, so bear with me. But right now, it sounds like this panel decides more than just whether or not how it's appropriated, whether it's conservation or how the cleanup happens. I think that the board needs to be involved and needs to head it up, but I think it needs to be specifically worded so that it comes back to the community to approve it. You know? Does anyone understand?
Well, maybe I can, if the voters turn down this motion, then they retain the right. If they pass it at the polls and it gets to the polls, then they're agreeing to give the decision.
Herein lies the issue. If this gets to the polls, the voters are going to be so confused, they're not going to know what they're voting for.
Right?
They're not.
I'm
The way
laughing
it's
at you,
worded.
I'm laughing at the situation.
Yeah. Well, the thing you have also too, at the end of the day, the EPA has the final say.
Right, but we're not dealing with the EPA right now. We're dealing with the citizens of Plaistow and the executives that are running it. So this is the only topic that we need to focus on right now, is that if it's reworded so that the citizens have the last say, as they should, and it's worded in layman terms so every voter in Plaistow knows exactly what they're voting for. I don't think this is hard to do. Otherwise, we're just going to do amendment and, you know.
So you need to draft an amendment to
You
the
can draft an
proposed,
amendment
so-
and submit it, but what I'm hearing is you want the voters to decide, and they would decide if they were voting on this at the polls. But if you want to write up an amendment and submit it and get it seconded, we'll discuss your amendment.
Okay.
Paper's right there, Pam.
I'm going to give her a moment because she's making a motion to amend. I'd like to see her amendment.
I want to have a discussion on it.
We already had a discussion on the amendment that was voted to amend. She wants to change it, so I need to wait. I don't know where she's going.
Can we add verbiage in there that says upon the completion of the
All
site?
she's looking for is this right here.
Oh, I know.
Take this. People. That's it.
Put it on the warrant next year.
This is all she's looking for.
Yeah, whatever. Just a minute. I'm going to call her back in. She may decide not to do that. Ms. Garney, I need that motion.
Don't want to take a break. Look at the 5-minute recess.
Bob, can we take a 5-minute recess?
Want to finish
Probably
this?
not a bad idea.
We as a board might be able to come up with something in that.
You guys need a minute to go talk.
The zoning stuff.
Exactly.
Have one after it. Zoning.
What's up to 5? It's up to 5.
Okay.
Good job.
Well, I see it clear. Mm-hmm.
That's true. Oh, no. I think she's running for the 2.
It's Connie.
Don't know. Ms. Garney's motion is basically to overrule and amend the current petition as amended to go back to the
Go
original
right back to the original
petition
for the citizens, yes.
that we discussed, as someone said, for the last hour.
Well,
So-
we've been kind of playing volleyball here, so just to go back to the original citizens petition. That's it.
Almost a reconsideration. So she basically wants us to go back to the original petition. I'd like to not have to discuss her motion too long. Anybody have anything to say about her motion to amend? Mr. Pelletier. Who else? So I have a motion to go back to the original petition by Ms. Garney, seconded by Mr. Pelletier. On that motion, any more discussion?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
She's good. Okay, so here's the vote. Do you vote to go back to the original petition of the citizens petition? An aye will go back to the original petition and its total as written in your warrant article. A no will keep us with the amended petition from Mr. Dumas. So to go back to the original citizens petition, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Abstained? So motion failed. Now we're back to the motion article as amended.
Like
You
to make
really want to talk about it?
I'd like to make a motion to restrict the
I can't
amendment.
hear Mr. Dumas trying to talk.
You can't restrict amendments until we vote on the amended petition, then you can restrict reconsideration.
Restrict the amended.
Not yet.
Not until after.
We haven't voted on it.
Can I call a question?
Yes.
I'm about to call the question. So we're voting on the article as amended here. There's no more amendments. We've already voted on this amendment, and this amendment already passed. So the warrant article will appear in the ballot as amended here by Mr. Dumas. So now, Mr. Dumas.
Make a motion to restrict.
We have a motion to restrict reconsideration of 100 seconds. Anyone you want, Madam Clerk. Who wants to go in the record?
I'll go on the record.
There you go.
Reconsideration of CP.
CP 23-02. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstain. The ayes have it. I have one more article, and I appreciate everybody's patience today, and it's always good to see everybody out here. We always wish more people would come to deliberative. We understand weather and other circumstances, but it's great to see you here and for your participation. Always welcome. There's a zoning amendment. The Board of Selectmen, we don't normally discuss zoning amendments because zoning amendments are not amendable at this meeting. They can be discussed. The Board of Selectmen received a request by Daniel Kane to talk about his citizens petition concerning signs. I was inquired if I would give Mr. Kane an opportunity to speak for 2 to 3 minutes on his sign petition citizens amendment. I deemed, since he asked, and it's the first time in about 12 years anybody's asked me if they could speak on a zoning amendment. As I said, we normally don't speak on them, but I'm one in favor of full participation. And if this Board of Selectmen also said, yes, although it's had public hearings, which is why we don't debate or discuss all the other amendments, because they're non-amendable. Mr. Kane has been advised that he has to stick on the topic of his petition, that it's non-amendable, but we will give him an opportunity to speak on it. His petition is
CP 23-1.
P23-1. It's found on my page 13, CP 23-1. I'm not going to read it because we don't read the others. So is Mr. Kane here? Would you approach the microphone, give us your name and address? And you have up to 3 minutes.
I'll be brief.
For the information, can we get the page number on that? Sorry.
Page 13. It starts at the bottom of page 13 and goes to the top of page 14. It was not recommended by the Board of Selectmen, and 040, and the Planning Board 230. Mr. Kane, floor is
Hi.
yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Kane. I'm a resident of 64 Main Street in Plaistow, and I'm the owner of Sweet Hill Farm. I just wanted a chance to provide some background on my proposed citizens amendment. It's my experience in owning this farm. It's taught me that farms have different needs than that of other entities in terms of zoning. And really, to get a true appreciation of this amendment, take a drive up 108. I've got a quarter of a mile of road frontage, and I've got 2 signs there. The ordinance as written limits me to a 1 by 3 foot sign, essentially 3 square feet. You would drive over it before you hit it. All this amendment, all my citizens petition does is try to take elements that are already baked into the zoning ordinance and kind of get them into where a farm's got a fighting chance. That's all it does. I didn't rewrite anything. I didn't redefine anything. I just borrowed. And I'm in the ICR zone, and that's where all the signage is. The ICR zone baked into the ordinance says it's a combination of the low-density residential and the commercial zones. That signage definition that you see before you comes right out of the commercial zoning definition. And that's all I was trying to do. And I tried to just limit it to the farm. Obviously, that's what I care about. And even, baked in what's already in the village center restrictions as to wooden signs and indirect lighting. I live here too. My daughter and 3 grandchildren live on the farm. I care obviously about Plaistow. I'm just trying to give the farms a fighting chance. And I will tell you, making this farm a destination is the only way we're going to save it. It's the only way. I've been at this for 5 years. If we don't get more people to come to this place, it can't be a farm. I can't grow enough on that farm to push the product off and make it economically viable. And I think if I'm left to kind of do what I need to do, we'll have something cool here for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on Mr. Kane's petition? Yes, sir.
Surprisingly, something I'm actually for. I'd like to speak in favor of this. I think government regulations are strangling small businesses, and I think lifting those will help them. And I think, that if it will help his farm, it'll help other small businesses. I don't even think it should be restricted to farms. I think it should be, more broadly applied, but baby steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pelletier. Anyone else to speak on that citizen's petition? Yes, sir.
So just in general, comment on all the zoning stuff there. I actually thought it was, I'm glad for the clarification. I thought this was restricting signage more. I'm for increasing some signage. That's fine, and supportive. There seems to be a lot more, and all the other myriad of things on there. There seems to be a lot more restriction between storage containers and campers and this and that. Are we having a storage container epidemic or people living in campers all over the place that's happening?
Yes, actually.
I don't see it, and I don't think they're unsightly, and I'm not for restricting people's use of their own properties.
Anybody else to speak on Mr. Kane's petition? Hearing none, it will appear on the ballot as written, as well as all the other zoning articles. I call your attention again to Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. We're at the Plaistow Fish and Game, 18 May Ray Avenue, from 7 in the morning to 7 p.m. at night. Dean Zanello and myself will be putting on a little presentation on cable about where you park, where you enter, and where the handicap parking is. For all those that are interested in the new location, if you happen to have never been to the Fish and Game. So I thank you very much for attending. I thank all of those that are watching at home for paying attention and helping out. And please show up at the polls, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., March 14th, fishing game. I'm going to declare this deliberative session closed. Thank you.
Thank you.